The incredible VR game called Deep Steel Frontier soon after its release gained thousands of players and became a popular game. However, there was an invincible existence that trampled on everything and everyone. This was the King of Darkness, Sadahara, who commanded everything from his throne. A being of the demon race with the title of Nightmare and level 999, which left many players irritated due to the extremely high difficulty to defeat him. However, among the cowardly players, one different from all decided to face the boss alone. This was a being of the human race with the title of Warlord and level 99. When challenged, the Demon King mocked the insect in front of him, warning him to feel honored for having the right to die at his hands. And then a memorable fight in the game's history began between two great powers of distinct races. The hero tried to attack in every way, using the maximum of his power, but despite his efforts, it caused no damage, which made the King of Darkness find the boy's attitude pathetic and challenging him with such small and pathetic strength. Even though he was losing, the hero showed no insecurities, and so Sada warned that he would show the boy the true meaning of strength. With that, by planting his sword in the ground, he activated his ability of the Abyss Echoes, which sent the hero Ichino Zen flying with a shockwave. After being thrown far away, fortunately, he managed to land safely and smiled, praising the interesting abilities of his opponent. However, at the moment Ichino's dared to boast of his resilience, he was captured by enemy beams that pierced his two forearms. The ability activated by the King of Darkness was called Bloody Doom. With that, Ichinos began to suffer damage and scream in pain, and Sada, in turn, was not surprised since the battle's outcome was already expected. In the monster's mind, humans are just weak and defenseless beings, so for one of them to have forced him to use one of his abilities is already a reason for praise. Finally, in front of the hero, Sada says he will consider fulfilling the boy's wish if he decides to beg for his life. However, even tied up and about to die, Ichinos does not succumb to cowardice and corruption, refusing to lower himself like that. In this case, the King of Darkness admires the boy's determination but comments that he cannot even move, not being in a position to maintain his convictions. In response, Ichinos addresses the issue of not being able to move very calmly, and proudly says that he was just waiting for the right moment to summon his special trump card that will end everything. In view of this, Sada, quite confident, questions whether the boy believes he has any chance against him just for summoning a remnant of the Angel King. However, as the being begins to materialize on the spot, the King of Darkness realizes that it is not a simple remnant due to the strong presence transmitted. Unexpectedly, the summoning was not just a remnant, but the true Angel King Kate, level 999, known as the Mother of Light. Thus, Sada understood that the hero was able to summon the true form, which was quite impressive. However, he says that nothing will change even if they work together. Suddenly, the Angel King begins to be contaminated due to the contamination in his relic. Until at a certain moment, the Mother of Light becomes completely corrupted and enraged. In this case, the hero thinks that from then on everything will come down to his ability to hit the timing. With that, a powerful blow from the angel goes towards the King of Darkness, and Ichinos manages to get out of the way of the attack just in time. In his mind, he understands that he will have a chance to kill the monster, but believes that he may have irritated his summon a little too much. Faced with this, Sada defends himself easily, but questions what the boy did to generate this result. To illustrate, it is said that the sword the hero is using is actually the angel's sacred relic, so he infused it with impurities earlier to enrage him. In view of the human's cunning tricks, Sada still remains confident, assuring that regardless of what is done, there is no possibility of the hero coming out alive. At the same time that the King of Darkness advances, the Angel King also attacks furiously, and in this case, Ichinos believes he is at the right moment to intervene. With that, at the moment of the clash of abilities between the two great kings of their rival species, the hero strikes a sword cut in the middle of the attacks, and proudly he warns that the Demon King, without even realizing it, has already lost this battle. With that, the hero declares that the fight is over, and as the amulet around his neck breaks, he says that the outcome was decided from the beginning. A special condition is triggered due to the hero's plan affecting both the Demon King and the Angel King, and thus a system notice appears. The system informs all players that the King of Darkness, Sada, has been defeated, and that his vanquisher was Ichinos Zen, the hero who now acquires the title of Demon King Slayer. With this in his room, the boy starts laughing while boasting about his achievement and belittling the boss's strength. Thus, he raises his arms in an animated gesture, knowing that his current achievement makes him the strongest player of all. Very happy, Ichinos claims to have fulfilled his dream and says that this is his best moment during his entire otaku life. Faced with this, he puts his hands on his face, striking a pose while recalling being the most impressive player of all. However, suddenly a notification sound on his computer catches the boy's attention. With that, the boy realizes he has received a gift from Ms. Trino and now needs to write a thank you message. However, upon closer inspection, the system asks if the hero would like to try a new destiny, now that the Demon King has been killed. Thus, the protagonist believes that if it is a gift, there is no reason to refuse. However, he notices that the system message about the Demon King being no big deal was exactly what he had said earlier, Therefore, Ichino's considered that what he was saying had been heard by someone until recently. Then, little by little, the hero's image on the computer starts to change, coming to life, and finally it turns into a black monster that smiles while wishing him to have fun again. Faced with this situation, suddenly a strong blue light begins to emanate from the computer screen. This leaves the hero impressed, but without time to react, the light starts pulling him into the monitor. In this way, even with much struggle, the protagonist is sucked into that plane while the entity responsible for this laughs in satisfaction. Later, in front of the Demon King's castle, a white tiger defends the castle from a goblin invasion that is currently getting the worst of it. Faced with this, one of the monsters curses at the tiger, saying there is no longer any reason for her to defend this place now that the Demon King is gone. In this case, the animal becomes extremely irritated and warns the monster with a threat to no longer profane Sada's name. Understanding that their current strength is not enough to defeat the tiger, the men retreat, saying they will remember this affront in the future. With the end of that conflict, the animal recalls Sada, her eternal and only master, and out of gratitude for everything he did for her, she will continue to protect the castle. Suddenly, inside the castle, someone begins to exit through the front door while questioning what happened and if he might have become the Demon King. The tiger looks without fully understanding, and this man is the protagonist who examines his status with strangeness due to the cursed condition along with the ceiling of his power. With not much to do, Ichinos looks ahead and greets the animal, who becomes quite scared. In desperation, the tiger says that the boy wore Sada's armor without proper permission. Thus, she jumps on the protagonist to attack this thief who invaded the castle and stole her master's belongings. For a moment, Ichinos closes his eyes, already expecting the worst, but he remembers that in this world he has the Demon King's strength. In this case, confident in himself, the hero does something stylish while activating the ability Echoes of the Abyss. However, unexpectedly, the ability does not emerge as expected, and the animal manages to bite the boy's arm. With that, the tiger starts shaking Ichinos, and the hero screams, not understanding why his ability is not working. In response, the system informs that the attack was blocked and an ability called Shadow Enhance was acquired, increasing movement speed for 5 seconds. In view of this, the protagonist believes he will have to learn the abilities from scratch and then activates his newly acquired one, escaping away from the animal. Soon he goes to the backside of the tiger in an instant and mocks her, saying that despite being handicapped, he is still a Demon King. However, at that moment, the curse is activated and the ability Shadow Enhance transforms into the effect Rock Guard. This left the boy irritated and desperate, but he noticed something more important ahead. The animal was coming toward him, and he didn't have time to dodge. When he tried to hold it with his hands, his arms quickly turned to stone, so the boy understood that he should continue like this until the bite weakened. Unfortunately, the system warned that the petrification status would soon end, which made Ichinos even more irritated with the curse. Understanding that he would have to resolve the situation with his own fists, the protagonist punched the animal powerfully in the stomach, sending it flying. This made the tiger very happy because despite the appearance being different, the feeling when punched was exactly the same as with her master. With this, she gradually began to transform into her human version, understanding that she was not dealing with an enemy. Then, after fully transforming into a human, she stated that she had been waiting for her master. And then she kneeled on the ground to receive some kind of affection from the King of Darkness. After witnessing this transformation, Ichinos was impressed that the Demon King had a tiger girl as a subordinate. Without wasting time, she jumped into the boy's lap, saying she was extremely happy to see him again, but Ichinos only questioned her identity and told her to back off. In this case, while having her face pushed away, the girl introduced herself as ManhwaRecap, the Mount Tiger of the Lord of Darkness. Thinking a little about it, the protagonist was intrigued by this, and the girl asked if her master managed to remember her. In the past, the girl was a demonic warring tiger, and the right hand of the king who led the beast people in this case. The hero was very surprised. While holding the girl's cheeks, he questioned how she could change so much, so she decided to explain. 100 years ago, the master was cornered by the Angel King. They fought, but the King of Darkness was defeated. As a result, the demonic forces dispersed and could not resist the expulsion of demons by the new Angel King Bel. It is mentioned that 6 of the 7 demonic leaders, who are the girl's companions, surrender to the enemy. After some time, everyone was surrendering to the Angel Clan. However, the Beast People, led by Mamam, continued to resist as much as they could. However, in the end, even the Beast People were captured by the enemies, and then Mamam, as their leader, was cursed by Bel to become a woman. In other words, the demon race was completely subdued by the immense oppressive power of the angels. Having drawn the entire story on the ground with a stick at the end, the girl asked if her master understood. In this case, Ichino said she could stop drawing and thought he was dealing with a very strange situation, since he was the one who defeated Sada. Despite this, there is no record in history mentioning his presence. Thus, the protagonist became very curious to know what happened during those 100 years that passed since the Lord of Shadows was defeated. Suddenly, Mamam appeared and requested that the hero free and retake command of the Beast People, which made him understand that he would have to follow the rules of this world while he was there. But no, the protagonist knew he should not take any risks while he didn't know how cursed he was. In this case, the system informed that the punishment for failing would include the blood source curse, which reduces speed and includes irregular bleeding with dizziness. This made Ichinose even more irritated, as the system insisted on pushing more and more curses on him. Thus, he thought of simply ignoring the mission, but right after thinking about this, the mission was automatically accepted, with no right to abstain. With that, Ichinose understood that he had no choice and accepted the mission to satisfy this system's will. After the mission was accepted, the system asked the boy to choose his reward, giving two options. The first allowed the boy to use part of the Demon King's power, and the second would help him obtain information on how to return to the original world. Thinking about it, the protagonist understood that if he chose option A and gained part of the Demon King's power, he could live in this world with abundance. Despite still having a life in the other world, Ichinose asked Mamam if the girl would lend him her strength if asked to fight side by side. In this case, the girl promptly agreed and said she had only been waiting for those words. Thus, Ichinose decided that he would choose option A as a reward after completing the mission. However, after choosing, Mamam informed him that she was no longer the chief of her tribe because, besides turning into a woman, her powers had weakened, causing her to be removed from the position. This information left Ichinose extremely disconcerted and beside himself. Feeling deceived, the boy stated that he only asked for the girl's help because he thought she was still the chief of the tribe. In this case, Mamam informed him that she could introduce the current chief to her master if he wished. With a sparkle in her eyes, the girl mentioned that once they know Sada has returned, all the beast people would come back immediately. This information calmed the protagonist a bit, and the girl slowly approached the hero, leaving him confused. Without even asking for permission, she lifted him onto her shoulders and announced they would be heading to the beast people's village. With that, she crouched down, putting a lot of force into her quadriceps and leaping towards her village, making Ichinose fly backward due to her speed. Later, at the Angelic Royalty Temple, two guards kept watch at the entrance of the place. Inside, one of the king's closest lackeys played chess, as was customary in his monotonous routine. At a certain point, the lackey informed his master, Belsama, that Sada had revived exactly as they had predicted. Even after receiving such information, the angel King Bel remained unconcerned, merely ordering the news to be spread to everyone. The lackey, in turn, understood that the Angel King's grand plan had advanced another step towards success. Bel then said that this was evident and now the next step needed to be taken, which was to kill him in the most cruel way possible. For it was said that the Lord of Darkness killed his beloved Kate Sama, making him deserve to suffer greatly at the hands of his beloved subordinates before being killed. In view of this, the lackey accepted all commands without questioning a single word from his master. At dusk in the Imperial Dragon Valley of Orga, amidst the cemetery of the Eastern Dragons, a warrior stood on the head of a red dragon. Quickly, the human approached and reported to his commander that they had received an order from the angels. This order was to eliminate the demon King Sada, who had unexpectedly been revived recently. Understanding the message, the commander became excited because he hadn't been able to find good entertainment for himself in a long time. In this case, he jumped back, demonstrating his skills and landing on the ground, creating a crater and raising dust all around. One of his subordinates became worried, but their leader interrupted this nonsense by issuing an order to the 3rd Division of the Black Moon clan. However, the order was simply to follow the commander because amid so many monster corpses, that man was confident he would be able to kill them all. In the Beast People's village in the Kazda Mountains, a religious fanatic said that only with the great angel King could they find true happiness. However, suddenly, with a gust of wind, someone approached at high speed, invading the village in a second. Inside, the person hid behind a bush while the Beast People walked around unconcerned. These intruders were our heroes, and the girl, in turn, questioned why her master hadn't made a triumphant return to the village. In response, he commented that it was a bit difficult to enter like that with a flag raised in the place that said, "Death to Sada." Even after they entered the village, the countdown to the hero's death continued. It was said that in the game, when players lost, sometimes they were added to the winner's side, but it never happened that people were forced to change their beliefs. In view of this, the hero questioned why they were doing this but understood that, whatever the case, the angel King would not let his guard down. However, first of all, the protagonist needed to resolve the leadership of the Beast People's tribe for Mamam because no one would join him if the tribe was against it. In this case, Ichinose asked if the reason the girl was expelled from the position of chief was because she stayed by Sada's side even after losing to the angels. In response, she confirmed, so our hero asked her not to worry because loyalty would certainly be rewarded with the respect of the Beast People. Changing the subject, the protagonist questioned where the current chief's residence was and Mamam informed him it was a house with a red flag on the roof. The heroes said they first needed to convince the one at the top, requiring them to enter the place quickly. Suddenly, as they looked up, some arrows began to come towards the heroes hiding among the bushes. Unfortunately, one of the arrows hit the girl's chest as she stepped in front of her master to protect him. Even with an arrow in her chest, she asked if Sada was hurt, and he was startled, telling her she should worry about her own health first. Breaking the silence, a voice commented disappointedly that Mammon was still wagging her tail for the same man. The person responsible for the comment then affirmed that, just as the angel said, the current Demon King really seemed like a useless weakling. Anyway, Enchi of the Beastmen race, level 32, thanked his former chief for bringing his prey to him. With that, the man told her to step aside, saying he would deliver Sada's head to Bel, and Mammon told him to shut up, stating that this shamed the Beastmen. Witnessing this dialogue, the hero was impressed by the fact that the angels already knew he had been resurrected. Then Enchi ordered his subordinates to capture the two using any necessary force. In response to this order, the girl warned that she would tear apart anyone who dared touch Sada-sama, and Enchi wished her good luck. Not wanting to just be protected, the protagonist told Mammon that he would take care of it, which made her embarrassed. With that, Ichinos mocked the Beastmen who were trying to suppress him and projected his strong presence, questioning whether it was really a good idea to become his enemies. Faced with this, everyone was scared, and the system informed that the hero had intimidated the enemy with his determination, causing a new skill to be acquired. The acquired skill was called Dark Lord Walk, which intimidated opponents for 15 minutes. And the activation method was quite simple, requiring only a strong stomp on the ground, which the hero decided to test. So he stomped both feet on the ground and shouted that he would impose the Demon King's intimidation on the Beastmen. Thus, even without attacking them directly, the presence transmitted by the skill made most of them faint from dizziness. Due to the protagonist's bad luck, a reversal phenomenon happened again because of the curse's activation. In this case, the protagonist told his servant to flee from there as quickly as possible. At that moment, the effect of Dark Lord Walk changed to provocation, causing all the Beastmen to return to their fighting positions. By luck or misfortune, the provocation succeeded, and the duration was locked at 60 seconds, making the protagonist start to lose hope. Soon, a one-sided battle began with all the Beastmen attacking the hero to finish him off as quickly as possible. Everyone started punching Ichinos mercilessly, so the boy believed he had no choice but to use that once more in an attempt to intimidate them. With that, the protagonist stomped his feet on the ground again, generating a strong aura that repelled the monsters and made them kneel. With this, Ichinos told the Beastmen to stop the commotion while lamenting that he wanted to avoid doing this in front of his subordinate. In this case, Mammon believed that her master was clearly overexerting himself and probably wouldn't last much longer. However, Enchi asked his former chief to stop this useless insistence and said that Sada must die for the good of the Beastmen, as it was an opportunity for them to shine again. Hearing such a statement, Mammon understood what she had to do to save her master. With a shout, she told everyone to be quiet and requested that they resolve this according to the tribe's traditions with a duel of 100 beasts. Ichinos was surprised, and Enchi got irritated, questioning if the girl was trying to buy time. However, at that moment, a voice was heard telling the boy to stop because, according to the tribe's rules, harming someone who requests the duel of 100 beasts was strictly forbidden. With that, the person behind that voice welcomed the former master of their people, and the demon lord Sada-sama understood it to be another new character. In view of the girl's request, Dadsen, the level 35 beast elder, announced that this was an all-or-nothing game that could end Mammon's life. After descending from his throne, the elder questioned whether the former chief really intended to continue with challenge, and Ichinos was surprised to find the leader so quickly. In response, the girl affirmed that she did, even though she was a bit anxious about it. In this case, Dadsen approached Enchi, questioning if he was Mammon, which made the warrior embarrassed and revealed that the true target was actually in front of him. In view of this, the elder stated that he already knew and tried to play it off by saying it was just a test. The hero, in turn, commented that the chief acted as if everything was fine, but the girl was injured and needed to wait until she recovered. In this case, the warrior questioned if there was any reason to listen to these demands, since they were the ones who challenged them to a duel. However, the beast elder threw a remedy to the protagonist, who thanked him but thought the old man was plotting something by agreeing so easily. Whatever the case, they have no choice but to fight because a duel of 100 beasts is the tribe's most important ritual and is used to decide anything. At the same time, as he removes the arrow from his companion's shoulder, the hero thinks there's no other way to gain the recognition of the Beastmen. Faced with this situation, the protagonist believes that the smell of blood is increasingly hard to believe as part of a game, but they still need to fight to survive. While being healed, the girl asks her master to flee while she will distract her people. She states with all due respect that her lord will not be able to win in his current state and that she will only be a burden with this injury. That's why, if she has to risk her life, she will do so to protect her master's life, creating a somewhat romantic atmosphere. However, Ichinos breaks this and pulls Mammon's cheeks, telling her to stop the nonsense and saying he can't leave her behind and flee. After all, he was once the strongest player who defeated the strongest of each race. The hero cannot afford to lose at this moment, and in any case thinks he has already discovered the Beastmen's weakness. Thus, Mammon feels relieved because she can see the confidence shining in her master's eyes. However, it is mentioned that since she transformed, her kindness has only increased in contrast to her power, which has significantly decreased. Without further delay, the Beast Elder strikes his staff against the ground and announces that he will begin the duel of 100 beasts. In this case, the hero believes he needs to get used to fighting as quickly as possible. With this, the Elder will explain the rules to Sada, since this is his first participation. So it is said that they use this whenever they need to decide something. The challengers will face 3 units from land, sea, and air, and the type of battle is entirely the choice of the challenged. If the challengers win, their wishes will be fulfilled, so Ichinos accepts without problems because the rules remain the same as the game. Thus, Dadson calls to the arena the first warrior to challenge the King of Darkness, leaving the hero astonished. The representative of the land unit, Banda, enters the arena, being an enormous and intimidating warrior. From the Beastmen race, this is Banda, who enters wishing for a fair fight and holds the title of King of Brute Strength. Faced with this, the protagonist is quite scared because this was not the warrior who should appear now. Quite excited, the elephant wishes for a fun fight, and Dadson announces that the battle will be an arm wrestling match. Ichinos questions if the land representative was not supposed to be Shadow, and it is said that Shadow died heroically after fighting against the angels. That said, he asks about Engels from the air unit and Waka from the water unit, being informed that they unfortunately met the same fate as the other. In this case, the protagonist remembers that 100 years have passed in this world, meaning his privileged information is no longer useful. Thus, Dadson strikes his staff on the ground once more, ordering both sides to prepare, and quickly a table of roots appears in the place. Although things are not going as expected, the hero knows that the Beastmen's strength is sealed, making it probably not so different from his own. However, upon closer inspection, he retracts what he said because just by looking, he knew this brute could hold 10 of him and 10 Mammums in each arm. With that, the protagonist's discouragement is visible on his face, believing his fate to be death. In this case, seeing her master's face, the girl decides to step forward in the duel, remembering the earlier plan. And thus, just before the clash begins, the hero truly believes he has no other option but to flee because fighting there will only result in his defeat. However, at the moment the competition begins, the King of Darkness decides to face the Beastman himself. In the end, Ichinos knew that if he fled there, he would continue fleeing in all situations forever. In such a case, Banda is excited that the Demon King himself came to face him and prepares to finish him off. Enshi, in turn, believes it is a waste of time, and due to the unprecedented substitution, Dadson questions if the warrior has any objections. Banda, however, states that he likes it, and with no objections, the duel between the two finally begins. Ichinos understands that despite his action being quite cool, his arm is almost breaking. And with the external attack detected, the system asks if the hero wants to activate petrification, which is accepted due to the current conflicting situation. In this case, petrification is initiated but with a duration of only 10 seconds, which begins to slowly envelop the protagonist's arm. Unexpectedly, Ichinos manages to endure for quite some time, impressing Banda with the strength the boy is displaying. With that, dust rises due to the shock generated in the battle, and in the audience, Enshi starts boasting, believing victory is on their side. However, upon closer inspection, Mammum and Dadson notice something quite different happening in the clash. Mammum points to the center of the arena, stating that the Demon King Sama has not lost yet. In light of this, Banda is impressed, saying that the hero is indeed a worthy opponent for an arm wrestling duel. However, even petrification did not solve the main problem, and in this case, the system detects overload in the boy's right arm and intensifies the petrification. With that, the hero smiles, knowing that finally the system is on his side, and now the counterattack will begin. Thus, with more and more force being put into the clash, the structures around start to give way due to the strong pressure transmitted by the two warriors. Enshi is extremely disbelieving that the hero is actually competing against someone capable of moving an entire mountain. The protagonist, in turn, believes that these innocents know nothing because the longer the fight lasts, the more his petrification ability levels up. When the hero came to this world and met Mammum, he noticed that playing in the safety of his room and experiencing things in reality are different things. However, when he was cursed, he somehow continued in the game's mood, but without a doubt, reality hit him hard. Regardless of the world he is in, the fight for survival tends to be the same. So when the fight was almost ending in his defeat, the system warned that the consumption of magical energy was increasing and soon petrification would no longer be usable. At this moment, Ichinos managed to gain a bit of an advantage, wondering if his opponent for some reason stopped putting strength into his arm. However, upon closer inspection, Banda was quite irritated, also showing he was serious in the duel and using a good portion of his strength. That not to lose the duel, Banda unleashed his beast origin, but the hero managed to hold him without problems. In light of this, he understood that his opponent had unleashed the true form of the Beastmen, and with a huge roar, he transformed into a true mammoth, the protagonist, while admiring the being, thought that this could be a cheat. In this case, Mammum is impressed by Banda's strength, but knows he won't be able to maintain that form for long. So she advises her master to hold on because the Beastman should return to normal in about a minute. Despite this, the protagonist thinks that talking is easy and with no other choice, believes he will have to use his trump card. Thus, he plants his 2 feet on the ground and begins to smile proudly at his abilities. Banda, in turn, is confused but continues to put strength into his paw, which is held by the 2 hands of the Lord of Darkness. In this case, the beast population begins to question what is happening because it should take longer for the transformation to end, and a strong wind blows everyone back. Among them, due to the strong wind, a bra lands on the face of the beast elder, probably from some female citizen in the place. Back in the duel, the situation intensifies more and more, with both giving their all to win this duel and earn the tribe's respect. Thus, a strong explosion happens, and when the dust settles, the beastman's earrings burst and he falls to the ground, admitting his defeat. Completely consumed by petrification, the victory goes to Sada, who thinks he has won in a way he cannot explain. In light of this, the beast population is irritated but believes that in the next battle, the boy will definitely be defeated. With the battle over, Mamam goes towards her master, happy that he won, and Enchi is in disbelief at the outcome of that duel. Dadson understands that the beastmen were defeated by the angels, but this devotion was implemented through fear. In this case, this demon king could be the key to freeing them. Despite having won the duel, the hero explains to the girl, somewhat embarrassed, that he cannot move. In this case, he apologizes but asks if she can carry him, which is understood without problems. However, at this moment, the boy's weight was too much for her to bear, making her question what technique made her master so tough. Mamam realizes that this phrase might cause a misunderstanding and apologizes. The system, however, informs that there are 13 minutes left until the defense effect ends. 13 minutes later, everyone heads to a volcanic region surrounded by lava and rocks. Faced with this, the protagonist asks the elder how long it will take them to reach the next arena and is informed that they have already arrived. In the interior region of a volcano, the second round of the duel of 100 beasts will take place. Despite complaining in his mind about the heat, the hero accepts the conditions and a mysterious being appears on his back. Quickly, he jumps and lands in front of Ichinos, leaving him quite surprised. After his grand entrance, the beastman announces that this will be an endurance battle. As he removes his jumpsuit, he reveals his body covered in scales along with metal armor on his shoulders, already prepared for the start of the clash. While stretching to begin, the beastman explains that the rule is simple. Whoever stays in the lava the longest will win, something he is confident he will achieve. After explaining the conditions, the warrior states that Sada's suffering will be inevitable and gives him a chance to surrender before they start. In this case, Ichino says he will not surrender, instead being eager to eat a seafood stew the beastman will turn into. It is said that the protagonist only said this because, as far as he remembers, the strength of the water beastmen is influenced by their mental state. However, this had no effect, as the opponent merely said he hoped the boy would continue boasting after entering the lava. Soon, Dadson and the two agreed on the challenge, signaling that the contest would be between Sada and Wara, and the endurance competition began. After the two jumped into the lava, the beastman representative stood up, showing he was calm about the lava and leaving his companions excited. However, Sada-sama was not emerging from the lava, unlike his opponent. In this case, Wara proudly commented that true pain does not even allow a person to scream for help, saying that the boaster probably melted. At that moment, one of our hero's legs was seen by all as it emerged from the lava. The beastmen were extremely confused, not understanding what was happening. At this moment, the protagonist appeared in great style, mocking the challenge by saying it was a delicious hot spring. Mamam was very happy to see her master well, and Wara watched the hero do synchronized swimming in the lava, believing it to be impossible. Suddenly, the protagonist dove again, leaving the warrior frightened, and in a deeper region, Ichinos thought that the water unit's weakness was its tail. With that, the warrior realized that the demon lord was planning a surprise attack from beneath the lava. In this case, the warrior thought that if the King of Darkness opted for an endurance contest, he would have survived longer. And in what was meant to be a fatal blow, Wara told the demon lord to die once and for all. However, the protagonist easily lifted him out of the lava with his 2 hands and a big smile. In his mind, the hero thought he already knew that his opponent could not stay in the lava for too long. Wara, in turn, questioned what Sada had done, as he and the water unit beasts could only enter the lava thanks to training to withstand these conditions. Thus, Ichinos commented that he would explain why he was so comfortable in such a hostile place. But when his opponent paid attention, the hero said that it was none of his business. At that moment, the system detected a high level of scalding temperature, and due to the curse's influence, the snow elegy ability was activated. The effect of the scalding temperature began to be neutralized, being replaced by something opposite, and the protagonist threw the beastman into the air. After falling back into the lava, Wara stated that the beast tribe would not be defeated so easily, but having reached this point, he would use his own trump card. For the good of the beast tribe, he could not lose, so the system explained about the abyssal ice stone, an item used by the water unit to adapt in training. Later, a subordinate reported to his captain that all preparations were complete and questioned Sada's position. In response, according to the information from the Angel Clan, it was said that Sada was currently in the Beastmen tribe participating in a duel of 100 beasts. From the top of a mountain of rocks, that group of humans approached the village, and one of them commented that the target was apparently in the magma tunnel. In this case, the commander believes they arrived at the right time because the King of Darkness is already setting the stage for his own death. All they need to do is give the final touch, so the commander activates his secret technique, Jimaru no Jutsu, and throws several of his weapons into the air. The commander's kumanes hit the points of a ritual triangle, and the subordinates are surprised, knowing it's the jutsu that turns everything to ashes. With this, the human leader points the palm of his hand at the ritual and commands it to explode, generating a strong energy reaction. After the ritual is completed, one of the subordinates asks the captain if their mission was just to kill the Demon King. The commander explains that more than just fulfilling their missions, they must ensure to carry out the will of Bel-Sama. Thus, they will kill him and anyone who dares to ally with him. Later, in the Beastmen tribe's settlement, a child runs with a pinwheel while an old man chases after, asking for it to be returned. In this case, the girl says that if he wants it back, he'll have to catch her in a race. Between these two personalities, a pregnant woman is sitting in a chair, talking to her belly. She comments to her baby that she has thought of 2 names for him, Wing and Root. After that, talking to her belly again, she asks if the baby likes it and says that when the father returns, they will ask him too. However, suddenly, an angel statue emits a red, malevolent, and intimidating aura, and as the focus shifts to the statue's face, it starts crying blood. At the sight of the second challenge of the 100 beasts, the 2 warriors continue their endurance battle in the lava steadfastly. Looking at his opponent, the protagonist provocatively comments that he doesn't seem so cool, as he needs to make comments like this due to the countdown. In this case, Wara tells Sada not to get cocky and questions what was done to the magma because he feels it's getting hotter. With this, our hero bursts into laughter and says that if the Beastman admits defeat, he can end it now. Enshi, in turn, gets irritated and promises to change the boy's attitude when it's his turn to fight him. However, looking at Wara, the protagonist notices something strange as he seems to be feeling unwell. Soon after, the system informs that the ambient temperature is increasing, making Ichinos wonder what this means. But quickly, he realizes as he sees his opponent collapse, unconscious in the lava. Without wasting time, the hero calls out his opponent's name, concerned about his condition, and rushes to him. As he approaches, Wara warns that the temperature is critical, meaning the volcano will erupt soon. This was definitely something outside the protagonist's plans, who, after understanding the gravity of the situation, shouted to everyone what was about to happen. The Beastmen, however, initially didn't believe that an eruption would happen at such an inopportune moment. However, they didn't even have time to question it because the volcano indeed started to erupt. In the magma region inside the volcano, the noise of the reaction began to spread throughout the mountain area. From the entrance of the site, flaming smoke was exhaled while a hawk managed to escape from there just in time. Then the volcano completely exploded with magma, and that hawk was Enshi in his original form, who left the site carrying everyone on his back. Faced with this, Dadson thanks the protagonist for saving them, but the Beastmen tribe couldn't share the same hopeful fate. Finally, while flying over the area, Wara wonders how this could have happened. Suddenly, the volcano starts an even bigger eruption, causing the townspeople to panic and run for their lives. Enshi, looking down at the village, notices that among the people needing help is his wife. In light of this, he becomes extremely distressed and quickly dives toward her to save his family. However, looking closer, the protagonist notices and warns that the wind from the beast's wings is increasing the fire. In this case, while flying over the area, the girl and a child start to feel unwell, so Dadson says they need to save them as quickly as possible. Thus, the hero looks at his subordinate, and they both understand what needs to be done, deciding to jump off Enshi. Quickly, the girl activates her original beast form, and Ichinos mounts her in animal form. After reaching the ground, they hurry to the location of those in need of help. Upon arrival, the hero extends his right hand for them to climb onto his mount as quickly as possible. After they get on Mamam, the protagonist orders the girl to run away using all her strength. It is said that if they can reach the hill beyond the village, they should be safe. After rescuing the girl and the child, she thanks them, but Ichinos says to thank him later because he needs to save others now. Enshi, in turn, warns that the eruption is continuing and that it will be the end of the Beastmen if they can't stop it. In this case, the hero remembers that Mount Kakaro only erupts every 1500 years, making the current eruption unprecedented. However, he wonders if his presence hastened the event nonetheless. The system's countdown shows 30 minutes remaining. Therefore, Ichinos thinks that helping the Beastmen there means gaining the leader's recognition, thus fulfilling his mission. So he tells Mamam that he will take care of the volcano and asks her to save the others, leaving Wara confused, asking how the boy will do that. In response, the protagonist states he needs to do something about it because he is their demon king, so they also agree to help. Watching from afar, the human commander says that soon the Beastmen will be consumed by the flames and exterminated, thus completing another mission of Bell. One of his subordinates then reports to the captain that all the exits of the village have been blocked, and he thanks him for the good work. In the end, he believes that even if the Demon King tries to escape, he will be cornered like a rat by his men waiting at the village gate. Unexpectedly, at this moment, one of the henchmen informs his captain that he can see the Demon King through the binoculars. The leader then asks in which direction he is fleeing, but what was really happening was quite hard to explain. Reporting what he sees to his commander, the boy says that the Demon King is heading towards Mount Kakaro. This leaves the human leader extremely confused, and amidst the volcano's eruption, Ichinos enters along with Wara in his beast form. Unfortunately, the Beastman warns that he can only take Sada to the crater because the temperature inside becomes too high for him. However, unexpectedly, the hero explains that this is good enough for him and tells the boy to leave the rest to him. Wara asks what the King of Darkness intends to do, then he jumps off the Beastman, saying he will extinguish all this fire. In the end, as he watched the madness in front of him, Wara thought the Demon King was quite different from what he had imagined. At this moment, due to the high ambient temperature, the Snow Elegy ability levels up, an ability where the user can freeze the area around and enemies. With this, the protagonist finally understands that these abilities are strengthened in response to attacks and hostile environments. Being this the case, the boy begins to undress, getting rid of the outer protection as increasing the contact area, with the magma will further strengthen his power. Thus, after the act, he is completely naked and lets the curse act on its own, burn even hotter than the magma. The curse in turn warns that the ambient temperature is extremely high and that the ability level has increased to a duration of 5 minutes. Due to reaching the maximum level, the Full Metal Code ability is learned, which is a cooling ability. Thus, the hero begins to feel his power overflowing and the cold wave coming. Then, to release his energy, he shouts for the volcano to calm its fury. Because it is a life or death mission, Ichinos thinks that he will definitely save the Beastmen tribe and complete the mission. In the village, the population begins to help each other under Mamam's command, who says their priority now is to get the children to a safe shelter. Flying over the area, Enchi informs his chief that the fire is getting fiercer, making him question if the new Demon King has not yet fled. In response, the Tiger Girl firmly stated that Sada would never do that. However, the system shows 25 minutes left for the mission, and Enchi said that the girl trusts him too much, even though he is not capable of stopping the magma alone. With that, Mamam states that if the responsibility lies with her chief, he will definitely make it happen. Given everything that has happened, she reiterated that it should already be clear from the fights that the Demon King is someone capable of performing miracles. Thus, the two beastmen fall silent because, at the moment, they can do nothing but trust the man who was supposed to be the enemy. Suddenly, a noise echoes through the village, making everyone look at the volcano and witness a strong blue light being generated from within Kakaro. With this, even from a distance, they realize that the magma has stopped flowing. Mamam gets excited, saying it's Sada's doing, while from a strategic position, the humans believe it's impossible since the Demon King's power is sealed. In this case, one of the subordinates asks the captain what they will do because if they fail, a Moon Clan could meet its end. Casually, the commander asks his soldiers not to worry because the Jinmaru Jutsu from before had an angelic curse. It is said that its power has not yet shown a tenth of what it is capable of, and the real fun is just beginning. While flying over the forest, Enchi wondered if it was really that vortex that stopped the eruption. However, looking closer at Mount Kakaro, he realizes that out of nowhere, the mountain started to collapse. In such a case, he rushes to his companions to warn them that they must flee quickly as the mountain has begun to crumble. The beastmen don't quite understand what is happening, and suddenly, one of the rocks, surrounded by a dark aura, approaches. Without wasting time, Mamam saves her monkey companion who would have been hit, but she ends up in the path of the projectile. Unfortunately, she is struck, causing severe damage to the former commander of the beastmen. With this, the girl falls to the ground, and due to the stone's explosion, the dark aura envelops everyone present as the monkey goes to help. Mamam tells him to stay away. Badly injured, she warns that there is something strange about this black flame surrounding her body. Dadson, in turn, after analyzing the situation, unfortunately understands it to be the eternal fire that burns souls, the infamous and terrible ability called Cursed Seed. It is explained that resentment is the source of Jingen's power, and nothing attracts more resentment than an unexpected death. Thus, the black aura begins to spread throughout the region, and the human commander says that when Mount Kakaro erupts, it usually leaves ruins. These ruins are said to generally be 400 kilometers, something that certainly triggers a thirst for revenge that adds to the accumulated curses and resentments. However, the human commander still couldn't understand how Sada managed to stop the volcanic eruption. Somewhat disappointed, the Beastmen leader says that they have been completely surrounded by the unquenchable flame of revenge, marking this as the end of the line. However, Mamam asks the Beastmen leader not to be shaken by an unforeseen spark like this. Thus, Dadson questions what the girl intends to do, and with a confident look, she says it's obvious. Using her claws and starting to destroy the debris, Mamam says she will get everyone out of there and lead them to a safe place. Dadson, however, asks the girl not to be reckless, as she will die before that, as to leave the forest they will have to advance 100 meters and expend a lot of energy. In this case, the former chief is undeterred by the warnings and says that you can't know until you try. She continues with a motivational speech, saying that if you fall, you just have to get up, and if you fall 100 times, you must get up 100 times. Finally, she says she will rise again from where she falls and will surely save everyone in need. Mamam is determined to do what needs to be done and ensures that a mere flame will not stop her from fulfilling her duty. With that, a crack begins to run through the mountain, and Dadson understands that the girl is right in her convictions. Thus, the current leader of the Beastmen calls his people, and they enthusiastically state that they will help because they are also part of the proud Beast tribe. Having said that, the chief feels very proud because in her mind, this is how the Beast tribe should be. In her mind, she is now happy because she is certain that Sada-sama is also fighting for their sake at this very moment. Then the former tribe chief leads her comrades to the salvation of the village as it is time to rise together. Back in the magma region, the protagonist wonders if this black flame surrounding his body is the work of the cursed seed. Shortly after, the system warns that the hero is suffering a mental attack and that the effect of the attack cannot be identified. In this case, he realizes that mental attacks are difficult to resist, although the cursed seed ability in the game was not that strong. Suddenly, a huge purple monster enveloped by decomposed bodies appears, being the cursed seed, a monster born from the conjunction of the dead's resentment. In front of the protagonist, this monster displays all its grandeur and intimidating aura. However, when attacked by the cursed seed, the hero realizes that he can predict its attacks with extreme ease. As he jumps on it, he says that because the monster is so big, its attacks are too slow to hit him. But while swimming in the lava, he knows he doesn't have an effective strike against the enemy and needs to find a weak spot in this thing to defeat it. Thus, the monster begins to exhale smoke and charge a dark attack that, when released, fires several skulls imbued with demonic energy. At the moment the attack approaches the protagonist, he believes he's doomed because there's nowhere to escape in the lava. At this moment, he takes a hit that passes through his chest, dispersing all the demonic skulls. Without time to be surprised, the hero's soul is separated from his body and one of the skulls returns, biting that soul. A skull manages to tear off the Demon King's arm, which throws him into despair. In light of this, the hero realizes he can't feel his left arm, so it's noticeable that soul damage directly reflects on the body. After immobilizing the target's arm, the monster begins to suck that soul into its gut along with the demonic skull. Ichinos, however, comments nonchalantly about the monster eating leisurely as if there were no problem. Initially, he thought the monster was slow, but actually it was just playing with its prey, boasting about its deeds. With that, the monster begins to attack again, creating a mist to use the element of surprise. However, the protagonist easily dodges it with a somewhat artistic acrobatic move. But looking at his back, he notices one of the skulls is there and ends up being hit in the chest again. After being hit, the hero understands that soul attacks cannot be defended against or avoided, and if this continues, he won't be able to complete the mission. At this moment, Ichinos is beginning to doubt if he will even manage to leave this mountain alive and doesn't know what to do. Back in the village, those exposed to the black flames began to go mad, and in an attempt to save their own people, they ordered the inhabitants to flee. Enchi was one of the unlucky ones who could no longer control his own body and aimed one of his arrows to his wife, who was trying to run as fast as she could. In this case, Mamam questions how this happened, and unfortunately, the black flame affects her again, now completely taking over her body. Dadson, who was one of the last unaffected warriors, tried to protect some of the children, but the former chief could only tell everyone to flee. With this, she reiterates that everyone should run away while she still has a bit of consciousness left. From atop a distant mountain, the human commander Jiro is satisfied with the results of the experiments because this is the power of resentment. It is said that the more one absorbs the curse, the more intense the mind's corrosion becomes. In the end, the person becomes a puppet of the curses, capable of attacking even those they love from the bottom of their heart. However, unexpectedly, instead of attacking others, Mamam makes a cut in her belly, saying that the beast tribe will not bow to this curse. With this, all the warriors follow the former chief's example and do the same to their bodies, worrying their families and releasing the curse from their bodies. Then, as the energy of resentment leaves the bodies of the beastmen, it begins to return to the volcano to reunite with its original form. As he approaches the cursed seed, the protagonist notices Mamam's soul, among many others, being sucked into the monster. With this, the hero realizes that after absorbing the souls, the monster has become even bigger and more powerful. Moreover, it was accumulating the power of the souls in the center of its body in a ball of dark energy. In this case, the protagonist starts swimming quickly in the lava, believing this might be his chance. Meanwhile, back in the village, the Beastmen leader believes that Mamam is beyond salvation, and that if they do not retrieve the souls from the cursed seed, everyone will die. Unexpectedly, at that moment, a noise startles Dadson, who looks back and sees a massive explosion at Mount Kakaro. This was the worst possible scenario because upon analyzing the situation, the Beastman realized it was caused by the cursed seed, which is now larger than the mountain. Thus, the system warns that the monster is absorbing the Demon King's soul and evolving into a creature called Chaos Seed. Dadson then falls to the ground, understanding that if the monster evolves and becomes even more powerful, they are definitely finished. Back on the humans' isolated mountain, Jiro proudly comments that the results turned out better than expected. With this, there is no one left capable of stopping it, and the Demon King should be extinct along with the Beastmen tribe. However, at that moment, the binocular soldier informs his captain that there is something inside the body of the cursed seed. This impresses both the human commander of the Moon Clan and the Beastmen leader, because the Demon King Sada-sama was standing right in the heart of the monster. In light of this situation, the protagonist gets irritated that the monster is devouring even his soul without care and says it's time to teach some manners. In the central region of the monster, the hero realizes that this is the heart of the curse, which leaves him confused. In this case, holding a ball of dark energy, he wonders what will happen if he decides to make it disappear. Then Anchinos squeezes the energy sphere, and the cursed seed begins to deteriorate in pain and suffering. From afar, the Beastmen leader shouts for the Demon King and wonders what he might be trying to do. However, in the humans' refuge, their leader still believes is just foolishness on Sama's part. It thinks that the current vortex doesn't have enough power to stop the Jingen Jutsu provided by the angels. The hero, on the other hand, realizes that his curse cannot control this dark power in the energy sphere. Thus, he extends his hand and lets everything be absorbed into the monster's body. In such a case, he wonders how much of his curse the cursed seed can withstand before collapsing. Then the system informs that due to the influence of Jingen, the curse in the hero's body has increased a level and started to be transferred to the evolved Chaos Seed. Thus, the monster roams the region, beginning to destroy everything in its path, emitting an unparalleled aura. In view of this, the villagers couldn't help but cry and lament the cruel fate awaiting them. One of the Moon Clan's subordinates informed his master that if they failed to follow Bell's orders, the clan would collapse. In this context, Commander Jiro calls his soldiers to leave, saying that the Chaos Seed monster will take care of the rest. However, at that moment, the monster lets out a supersonic scream, and unexpectedly, this attack heads towards the Moon Clan humans. Gyro, in turn, feels an absurd thirst for blood, but this thirst definitely did not come from Chaos Seed, so he is frightened and wonders who it was from. Then the system announced that all curses were transferred to the monster, and that due to its low level, the curse would lose control. With this, the debuff effect is instated, separating the hosts. An evil being is surprised because behind him, an even greater enemy appeared. The debuff consisted of the summoning of the being known as the ancestral colossal dragon at Concord. With this, the commander wonders if a dragon emerged from inside the monster but understands it to be just a residual memory. But even though it is not the true ancestral dragon, it manages to subdue the evolved Chaos Seed without showing any difficulty, throwing it against an artificial wall that was also created by the system. Thus, some of the absorbed souls begin to exit the monster's mouth. And from that image resembling a wall, another being starts to be created, this being the devourer of the sages, contempt who created the ancestor of the sages' race, Seinonada. With this, the monster tries to get up and defend itself from the attacks, grabbing some rock pieces and throwing them at its enemies. However, when the rocks approach the sage ancestor, he simply stops them in the air with extreme ease. Moreover, the debuff Depths of Rancor is activated, also summoning the ancestor of the Sea Tribe Titan. Thus, the three most powerful ancestors in the entire universe are facing a monster that, in the end, is nothing compared to each of them. With no escape, the monster looks to its left and sees a group of beastmen gathered. In this case, targeting Dadson along with his group, the monster attacks them with its demonic energy. The leader of the beastmen understands that it is trying to steal their souls and fight against the residual memories of the ancestors of other races. Unfortunately, the attack continues its path because despite being the tribe leader, he cannot save himself or the children. However, at that moment, Mamam appears, serving as a mount for our hero and strengthened by the Beast King's War debuff, allowing her to defend Dadson. At this moment, the monster is attacked by Mamam, who, due to her enhancement, is the same size as the enemy, and the protagonist apologizes for the delay. Thus, everyone realizes it is the Demon King Sada, and the hero mocks the curse that no longer seems so great now, reminding them he had warned them about what would happen. With this, one of the Moon Clan subordinates comments in awe about the Demon Lord who defeated Chaos, while another does not see much importance since they have also defeated it before. However, their commander explains that what that guy did was much more than just defeating it. His subordinates do not understand what the commander means by this, so he explains that those ancestral beings seem to be controlled by the kingdom. The system, in turn, indicates that the harmony of the curses is activated, which refers to a miracle that can occur among different curses due to a powerful soul. In light of this, the monster's soul starts running away to save its life, but the protagonist won't let that happen and tells everyone to go after it. It is said that Chaos Seeds are originally a conjunction of grudges and that their powers are far from comparable to those of the Demon King. The Demon King realized this and somehow tricked the manifestations of the remnants of the ancestral beings residing in its body into believing that the Chaos Seed was the Demon King, which made them attack it. In response to the attacks, the monster tries to divide itself into multiple soul essences to increase its chances of escape, choosing different paths. However, the ancestral dragon goes after it and without wasting time begins to conjure an energy sphere that is launched against the monster, causing unparalleled destruction. Quickly, it begins to go after the remnants of the soul curse, but it wisely places its physical body in front to save itself. Thus, taking more damage from the direct hit, the monster notices some blue squares being summoned. After their summoning, they group together and emit a light that forms a barrier around the Chaos Seed. Then, with it trapped in a cage, the ancestral dragon releases its energy blast again to finish it off once and for all. As planned, the energy blast hits the monster, which falls wounded to the ground. Following that, a skill called Wind Blast Cage is activated by the barrier. This skill launches more energy blasts, but this time from different angles. After this, it is revealed that the person behind the creation of this barrier was the ancestor of the sages, Senyunana. With this, it is finally time for the ancestor of the Sea Tribe to contribute to the battle, launching his large-scale skill, Deep Meteor. This energy blast is by far the largest of all, and with the monster trapped inside the barrier, it has no chance to dodge. Soon, it begins to be vaporized, and finally its physical body goes in a powerful explosion, leaving only the vengeful souls fleeing in despair. Amidst skulls and bones, they wander the region more abundantly, having lost the one who was responsible for organizing them. Thus, the ancestors begin to disappear, and one of the Moon Clan's subordinates is impressed by the destructive power of their artificial manifestations. He continues, saying that it would be better not to underestimate whoever controls them. Jero, however, comments that this also means he does not have a stronger attack than this method he had to use. In this case, one of the soldiers questions whether the Demon King is as strong as they think, and the commander continues, saying that their chances to attack will arise when they seal the powers of the ancestors that Sada controls. With this, the human commander of the Moon Clan states he already has a plan to kill him and calls his comrades to come with him. Back in the village, Mamam, safe and sound, thanks her master for the wonderful work he did that day. However, the protagonist says it's still too early to celebrate because the main problem has not been resolved. The girl, in turn, asks what her master means by that, then suddenly, a tremor begins due to Mount Kakaro, which returns to its eruptive state. Faced with the disaster that the eruption would cause, Mammon tells everyone to flee, but Dadson says it's too late and explains that everyone is already exhausted. Thus, the protagonist agrees that they are not in a condition to try to escape. However, eating a compressed dark energy sphere, he comforts them by saying they won't need to flee. Quickly, Ichinos begins to climb the mountain towards the volcano, and upon entering the central region of the explosion, the beast warriors shout his name. Dadson, in turn, wonders if the Demon King went there to quench the fire, and Mammam, quite disappointed, explains that she would like to believe otherwise, but at that moment, everything appeared to be the case. However, suddenly, the Beastmen leader changes his mind upon witnessing something incredible in front of him. He calls for the girl and points to the lava, which is beginning to freeze. Not just superficially, the protagonist advances, freezing everything, and the system warns that the temperature has surpassed a critical value, entering a state of scalding heat. As a result, the Snow Elegy ability gets an upgrade due to the high temperature of the place. And already fully frozen, the hero believes he's the coolest guy in the world. Then the freezing process begins, and in an instant, the entire mountain turns into a pure and simple block of ice. The top of Mount Kakaro is completely taken over by intense ice, and at that same moment, the village's climate transforms into freezing cold. Thus, the protagonist snaps his fingers and frees himself from the ice surrounding his body. Consequently, he also frees the entire mountain from the formed ice block, leaving only the mountain in its cold and extinguished state. Ichinos then states that such an eruption is nothing for the Demon King, but thinks that if he hadn't used Jingen to strengthen the curse, it would have been dangerous. Without wasting time, Mammon begins to cry and runs towards her master to hug him. Thus, the protagonist swells with pride and starts saying that it was nothing for him while remembering everything he went through to get there. However, since the entire village was saved by the man whom the Beastmen swore to kill, they gathered in front of the hero. At that moment, they all had empty, standardized expressions and not showing the true reason for being there. That's why the hero asked what Dadson wanted with this, angrily questioning if he would like to continue the duel of the 100 beasts. The first person to understand the true meaning of the tribe leader's strange actions was Mammam, who realized it was the approval ritual the moment Dadson pulled a piece of the boy's hair. It is said that the Beastmen tribe takes pride in their robust bodies and fur more than anything, and that they consume the flesh of their enemies. However, from their allies, they consume the fur as a form of gratitude, expressing their respect in this way. With this, the protagonist misunderstands and believes it means everyone will want to eat his hair. Saying that the hero really doesn't want to become bald, he asks them to continue the challenge to gain their respect in another way than this. Dadson, however, denies the duel request, seeing that they are indebted to the hero, but at that moment, Enchi intervenes, saying that this goes against the rules. In response, the Beastmen leader says that rules and traditions are trivial in this situation and comments that the boy must also be exhausted. However, Enchi says not to worry about him because he can transport the Demon King to the location of the third trial. Consequently, if the Demon King also wins the third trial, he will probably regain the respect and leadership of all the Beastmen, being the last necessary sign. In view of this, Dadson agrees with his colleague because then everyone will be convinced and accept the new commands. In this case, Enchi pulls Ichinos by the arm, taking him away from the crowd and making them follow the protagonist, who asks to be taken away as quickly as possible. Thus, the tribe leader says they should prepare a formal reception to welcome the Demon King to their village, and he climbs onto Enchi's back for the third test. Back at the Moon Clan, one of the subordinates asks his captain how he will know that the Demon King will pass through there. Since the third round will be a speed competition against the Birdman, he asks about their destination and whether they should give a signal to the others. Jaro, however, just asks his men not to worry because the Demon King will come to them. Back in the village, everything seemed to be running normally, but suddenly the Birdman's wife appeared, running and crying. When she arrived in the village, everyone realized it was Enchi's wife and asked the reason for the girl's arrival. Without much formality, she broke down in tears and handed over the person she had been carrying, who was her husband, who had been killed. In light of this, Dadson was extremely confused and frightened, but Mamam recalled that Enchi had been with them just a few minutes ago. In this case, she questioned who the man was who took the Demon King for the third test of the 100 Beasts. While the protagonist flies, he comments that Enchi is more honest than he imagined, and for that reason, he will ask Mammon to grant him an elder position. In this case, the Beastman says it is an honor, but before that, he has a request to make. And at the moment our hero asks what it is, Enchi responds that he wants him to succumb by his hands. Thus, an explosion occurs, and during a transformation, the protagonist realizes that an enemy was disguising himself as Enchi. Immediately after, a magic circle appears under our hero's feet, and from this circle, energy ropes emerge, restricting the boy's movements. Upon immobilizing him, the assassins appear one after another to finish off their target, and one of them throws a smoke bomb that explodes at point-blank range. The protagonist struggles a lot as he realizes he fell for the trap. Then one of the bandits approaches for a thrust. However, the boy analyzes the situation and manages to recognize this battle tactic. Back in the village, the real warrior Enchi lost his life with just one attack, and his wife was left completely devastated. Dadson, on the other hand, from the wounds, realized that this was the style of the Black Moon clan. The 7 great clans had signed a non-aggression pact for years, but now this sudden attack should be Bell's doing. For this reason, the elder warns Mammon that they will need to remain calm and assess the situation. However, there is no sign of the girl anywhere. Then one of the soldiers informs them that she left while the chief was still speaking to go after the Demon King. As a very loyal subordinate, the girl wastes no time and rushes out to help. Back at the ambush, the protagonist uses a hard shell to defend himself from the thrust, leaving the assassin impressed. By a miracle of fate, he had time to use the stone armor. However, the others were not intimidated and charged at him as a group. Pooling their strength, 2 of the bandits launch the attack Black Moon Flame Prison. As the smoke rises, they wonder if the problem is solved. However, the smartest one can see that it is not, and since the average level of the Black Moon clan members is 55, there should be no one capable of breaking the armor. And if they devise a trap to capture him, it means they cannot face beastmen directly. In this case, the hero, still trapped, thinks it is best if they continue wasting their useless attacks. Because the more they wear themselves out, the better, but suddenly, something starts moving in the magic circle. Apparently, the bandits have invented a way to counter the stone armor over these 100 years, and now the 5 of them charge at him again all at once. The protagonist still does not have other defensive techniques, and their physical attacks are not enough to awaken the presence of the ancestors. For this reason, as the end approaches, the boy thinks there is nothing he can do. However, at the last moment, he remembers that he still has one last card up his sleeve. The requirements for the reward have been met, and a Demon King ability has been unlocked. That ability is the Blood Ruin, one of Sada Hrag's 3 supreme techniques, capable of absorbing vitality and blooming flowers that enhance his attributes. In the end, nothing compares to good old brute strength, as all the bandits are eliminated. After overcoming this obstacle, the boy is recognized by the chief of the Beastmen tribe, completing 65% of the mission, which will further restore his power. Once again, the power of friendship triumphs, and Ichinos thinks that perhaps he is more of a fantasy protagonist than a Demon King. However, the battle does not end, as the voice of someone surprised by this last-minute move is heard, and that is the leader of the Black Moon clan, who is there to deal with his subordinate's problem. To the hero, the man is someone with courage, as he is still there even after witnessing his defeat. However, the leader states that while he had courage, Ichinos lacked perception, because even knowing which clan they were from, he kept taking their attacks. And before he could even understand what he was getting at, the veins on the boy's face turned purple. A system message then alerted him that he had been poisoned. Even the subordinates suffer the effects of this poison, as it is one capable of exterminating everyone in the Beastmen village. And now it is accumulating inside the hero's body due to the technique he used. With that, the leader finds it ironic that the Demon King's own technique is the reason for his downfall. And as he withdraws his kunai, he warns that he will not even ask if the boy has any regrets. However, unexpectedly, the protagonist smiles, saying that he is not poisoned at all, which obviously leaves the leader startled. Due to the large amount of toxins in his body, the healing ability Demon's Blood is activated, recovering 3% per second. With that, the leader throws some kunai, still not understanding why the poison is not working. However, the protagonist reacts with an imposing stance and uses his Blood Ruin ability, easily deflecting all the knives. Noticing that he is losing control of the situation, the Black Moon leader realizes he needs to find a way to conceal himself, and so he throws himself into the forest, trying to gain some kind of advantage. Since the boy has not fully recovered yet, finishing the battle is proving to be difficult. However, the protagonist shouts, saying that he will not let the leader escape, and once again he summons his ability. However, due to the curse's influence, his maximum MP is reduced, and the Demon King's techniques are now limited to 3 uses per day. Additionally, in order to restore his full power, he must complete the mission, which is frustrating since it is happening at such a crucial moment. The leader, in turn, understands this pause and attacks as a possible mana depletion. So, whatever the case may be, he believes this is his opportunity to strike back with full force. However, none of the knives thrown by the bandit manage to hit the protagonist. But at the moment one of them pierces a rock behind the hero, the leader teleports to that exact spot in a style similar to Minato Namikaze. Yet again, the thrust is frustrated, forcing him to retreat slightly to continue. At least that is what the boy thought, because explosive scrolls had been placed on his body. And since the leader was far enough away, the bombs exploded, launching the boy into the air and leaving him badly injured. Thus, the assassin understands that this is his moment to end the battle once and for all and delivers a powerful kick to the protagonist's face. The force is enough to hurt him and raise a huge cloud of dust from the ground. Then, the Black Moon leader uses the multi-shadow clone jutsu he copied from somewhere, and from the smoke, several clones of the assassin emerge, surrounding the protagonist and charging at him mercilessly. However, in the end, getting beaten up so much was worth it, because the protagonist had been waiting for this moment to launch a direct attack. Combining his stone armor with the Blood Ruin ability, Ichinos learns a new technique called White Bone Inferno. The protagonist had been curious to see if he could use combined techniques, and this was a last-second risky gamble, but it worked. Now the boy would show what happens to those who dare to challenge the Demon King. With the Black Moon leader on the ground, Ichinos questions whether Belle was the one who gave the order to attack, and he asks if she extended the order to all 7 great clans, but the chief decides to remain silent instead of revealing their plans. Suddenly, he begins laughing uncontrollably until he raises his arms toward the sky in a near-mad state. The protagonist then grabs one of the knives and asks the reason for this behavior, but he realizes that something strange is indeed happening. Even while kneeling on the ground and practically defeated, the Black Moon leader brings up an unexpected topic, saying that the moon looks beautiful tonight. And before the boy can even react, he reveals a tattoo on his chest, declaring that the long-awaited moment has arrived. Then he stabs himself and commands something to manifest, causing a red mist to spread. At the same time, the moon turns completely crimson, completing the Blood Moon's summoning, and the assassins rise once again to fight. The leader in turn becomes completely insane, fixated on the red color of the red demon. At that moment, the boy realizes that both the subordinates and the leader himself were merely sacrificial pawns sent to activate this technique in the end. The Black Moon leader agrees, commanding the boy to witness the power of the true opponent who is about to arrive. Redder than the moon and with a soul darker than the night's abyss, the Blood Warrior demon who cut down 1,000 men, and also the founder of the Black Moon clan, begins to take form amid a dense dark energy, until, standing before the protagonist, the monster appears named Akatsuki Yasha. However, he has a weakness. He can only maintain this state for 3 minutes, a seal similar to the one our hero possesses. Without wasting any time, the demon rushes for the protagonist, preparing a powerful punch. And since his level is much higher than the hero's at the moment, Ichinos cannot even follow his movements. In a quick move, the boy tries to attack first with his kunai, but the monster easily defends and prepares a counterattack. After all, he is capable of wielding 2 swords at the same time, so the boy senses the danger approaching and dodges at the last second before the worst happens. Quickly, Ichinos repositions himself a little further back, but that strike definitely should have finished him. This makes it clear that the monster is not taking the fight seriously and is merely toying with him. Filled with rage, the protagonist finds it frustrating but knows that his best option is to try to buy time by running away. After all, since the demon is a summoned entity, he must have a time limit. The protagonist believes it is better to run into the forest, as Yasha will have more difficulty finding him among the trees. However, the moment the protagonist takes cover behind a tree and scans his surroundings, he realizes he could not have been more wrong, because the monster has already found him and launched an attack, causing immense destruction in the forest. And since the boy managed to dodge an area attack, he acquires the technique Circle of Fortune. Its effect, however, reduces the hit rate of attack abilities by 20%, while other effects decrease by 50%. But due to the curse's influence, everything is reversed into an increase, bringing the boy face to face with the demon, who smugly taunts Ichinos to attack him. At this point, our hero becomes extremely irritated because the monster, not having had enough fun yet, wants to continue this game of tag. Ichinos makes a point to warn the demon that he is underestimating him, stating that cutting down trees that don't fight back is no achievement. Then he assures Yasha that with those little onion-cutting knives, he won't even be able to cut a single strand of his hair. However, that was enough to make the monster get serious about the fight. But that was exactly what the boy wanted, because if he is correct, he should be able to defeat him with that technique. At that moment, the demon releases his sinister dark aura, causing a distortion. It is said that ancestral beings can only exert their full power when they are within their own territory. And as far as the protagonist knows, the territory of the Black Moon ancestor, Seishin, is the lunar field. Under the red moonlight, gravity and attraction are entirely under his control, and within this territory, members of the tribe receive many enhancements. Gravity is also increased to hinder the opponent's movements, while around the wielder, it is reduced to assist in attacks, making it a serious problem. Without hesitation, the demon charges forward, throwing his katana at the protagonist, who dodges without much effort. Because, as he expected, the blade was never going to hit him, and Yasha is quite surprised by this. As the demon's blade pierces a stone wall behind Ichinos, Yasha uses his powers to call it back into his hand. However, as things are now, the boy will not be able to defeat this opponent despite possessing a curse within him equivalent to the power of an ancestor. Based on his experiences so far, the hero has already discovered that external curses and debuffs have no effect on him. And if that is the case, he believes he has a chance to win. Then the system notifies him that due to the curse's influence, the reflective lunar field will be activated to nullify the effects of the lunar field, and the two lock eyes, until the protagonist takes his combat stance, declaring that the battle begins now. Swiftly, Yasha charges forward at high speed to attack. However, by combining the reflective field with the circle of ruin, the boy realizes that he may be able to match his speed as well. And if he can endure until the summoning time runs out, victory will be his. But his opponent is an ancestor, and he will not allow the boy to stall for time so easily. Yasha will eventually find a weak spot and will strike the final blow with all his strength. Ichinos, in turn, defends himself with as much resilience as possible, and the moment the sword touches his armor, a purple energy begins to manifest, leaving the boy satisfied and the demon so startled that he takes a step back to try and understand what is happening. Then, in his new form, Ichinos praises his opponent's intelligence, saying it is expected from an NPC of ancestral level. After all, if he had taken any longer to react, the hero would have absorbed him. The system notified that the reflective lunar field and various abilities have been integrated into the Black Rock King form, so Ichinos declared that it was his turn to attack. And while the demon was still trying to understand the situation, the boy charged forward at high speed. Seeing this, Yasha attempted to throw some katanas to disrupt the charge, but the protagonist deflected them all in an instant. He even redirected one of them back toward the demon while positioning himself above him to deliver a decisive blow. Imbuing his blade with magical energy, the boy attempted to strike, but Yasha dodged backward at the last second. Even so, the trail of destruction was enough to affect the entire forest, and Ichinos did not give up after just one attack. However, the monster was still able to defend himself with a bladed claw, which surprised the hero since he thought the monster was already unarmed. This was actually a hidden blade, and alongside it, Yasha launched a concealed kunai that dangerously closed in on the hero's face. As he charged forward, the protagonist thought that although the demon's speed was still superior to his, in terms of combat experience, he had accumulated quite a lot as a player. And because of that, he not only landed a decisive attack, but also took a moment to be proud of his own power. However, Ichinos quickly realized it wouldn't be that easy, because what he had just defeated was only one of the clones created by the leader's multiplication technique. Almost immediately, the demon manifested again, but this time he lunged with an even faster body impulse. His speed was so great that he created illusions of himself surrounding the hero. With all his strength, he attempted to strike through the armor, but unfortunately for him, his attacks would no longer work, and since it was impossible to tell which one was real, Ichinos simply grabbed his sword and spun it in a full circle to cut them all down. Along with that, a cloud of smoke rose, but the protagonist's silhouette remained visible, prompting Yasha to stealthily attack from above. Unexpectedly, he landed a clean strike, but it didn't even scratch the armor, leaving Ichinos surprised and Yasha in total disbelief. With that, the boy remarked that the demon no longer had the strength to pierce his armor, and without any mercy, he delivered a powerful counterattack. Yasha fell to the ground, and Ichinos stated that now the demon had no chance of winning. With his sword in hand, the protagonist prepared for the final blow as his transformation gradually came to an end. At that moment, the Black Moon leader tried to say something, and Ichinos halted his attack, asking if he was about to beg for his life. However, the chief understood that he did not deserve mercy and said that he only wanted to share some information about his clan. So the protagonist accepted, as the assassin did not seem to be acting in bad faith. Without wasting time, he warned that, as Ichinos already knew, the angel King Bell wanted to destroy him and desired that such an act come from his former subordinates. At that moment, the boy understood why they had targeted the entire tribe. In other words, Bell had ordered everyone in the Black Moon clan to carry out the attack, because if not for absolute orders, they would never have done it. Ichinos, however, did not fully believe it, but in his final moments, the leader asked the Demon King to accept his life in exchange for his clan's forgiveness. And so he ended his own life and bid farewell, leading the hero to accept his sacrifice, realizing that Bell was truly the one imposing these orders on the other clans. At that very moment, a system window appeared, marking the mission as complete and removing part of the curse. Feeling quite satisfied, the protagonist realized he would have no time to rest but hoped that everything was going well for Mammon. Without hesitation, the system suggested a new mission, and the boy accepted. However, as soon as the Black Moon leader passed away, a dark energy engulfed his body and raised him once more. Then, in the same instant that it gained control over the assassin's body, it lunged forward and drove a katana straight into the hero's chest. Obviously, Ichinos could not comprehend what was happening. And with a terrifying expression, that entity mocked the boy, saying he seemed to have been having fun, making it clear to the hero exactly who it was. However, the protagonist was outraged that the entity was leaving instead of finishing him off. Then it apologized for not having time and warned that they would save this entertainment for next time if the boy was still alive by then. In the end, the protagonist understands nothing, but his wound is truly deep and could definitely take his life. Suddenly, a feather falls from the sky, and from that feather, the presence of a mystical being hovering above the area is revealed. This is a level 74 Watcher Angel, and no matter how one looks at it, he is not there to help the hero. At this moment, Ichinos thinks that everything is lost, but the system notifies him that part of the curse has been removed. Thus, it becomes clear that there may be a way to turn this situation around. The angel, on the other hand, mockingly comments on the fact that the boy is still alive and that the Black Moon clan has failed. Following the absolute orders of Bel Salman, he then announces that he will finish the target in their place. However, in a sudden turn of events, Ichinos does not hesitate for even a second before standing up and piercing the intruder. Obviously, the being is desperate, unable to understand how the Demon King appeared behind him. However, for the protagonist, this was quite convenient. Now that part of the curse had been lifted, he could unleash the Demon King's full power for 5 minutes. Thus, he used a technique called Sudden Step, which allows him to teleport behind his opponent. With victory in his grasp, Ichinos chuckles at the fact that his opponent can still fight. However, he does not feel fear, only excitement to finally test the true powers of the Demon King. In a swift charge, the angel attempts to finish the protagonist, but Ichinos catches the spear using only 2 fingers. With just a single touch, the weapon deteriorates completely, making the angel consider the possibility that the king's powers have been fully restored. Fearing for his life, he immediately flies away, knowing he must report to Bel Salma as soon as possible. However, our hero has no intention of letting the messenger escape. Using his dark energy, he completely engulfs the angel and summons a sword that slices him in half. With only 2 seconds left, the protagonist releases even more power, telling his opponent to witness his strength. And inevitably, he collapses to the ground, completely exhausted from pushing himself so hard. However, in his most vulnerable moment, the boy falls into the arms of another suspicious figure. This was Montes, the traitor of the Demon Clan, who was surprised that the king's strength had not rusted. Later, back at the Sacred Palace, Montes reports all the failures to the Angel Queen. He also informs her that, as it seems, Sada's power has been fully restored. At that moment, Belle realizes that they no longer need the Black Moon clan and that she will have to deal with this matter herself. However, Montes asks his queen to wait a little longer, as there is still a tool within that clan they can use. Remembering Fumizuki, the person they were referring to, Belle becomes intrigued. She then accepts the suggestion and orders Montes to assign Fumizuki from the Black Moon clan, with the warning that they must eliminate the Demon King or else their entire clan will be exterminated. During the angel's display of power, one of the officials begs for forgiveness but states that Fumizuki cannot complete the mission because she has not yet finished the succession. However, the angel does not care, but someone interrupts him, saying that this will not be necessary. Turning around, the angel notices that in an instant, all of his companions have already been defeated, lying on the ground. The girl they were speaking of had appeared, avenging her fallen comrades and stating that she had already received her orders. Then, in the name of the Black Moon clan, she declared that she would definitely put an end to the Demon King Sada. Later, on another day in the village, our hero slowly begins to wake up. As he opens his eyes, Mammon, who is tending to her master, asks if Sada is feeling well, and Ichinos questions how he ended up there. She explains that they discovered someone was impersonating Enchi, so she rushed after her master and found him collapsed in the forest. At this moment, he asks what happened to the Beastmen tribe, and Mammon informs him that although there were many wounded, many also survived. Regardless, the system removes the coma state due to the power release, and Ichinos realizes it was sheer luck that he completed the mission at that moment. With that, he decides to explain that the assassins from the Black Moon clan were sent by the angels, and even though they have been eliminated, the angels now know his whereabouts. Dadson, however, is not too surprised by the conspiracy, while Mammon shouts that they must leave as soon as possible. Since the angels are likely to send even stronger assassins, the boy knows he must complete another mission and learn more abilities. And it seems they are also targeting his subordinates, which means he needs to become stronger to prevent sacrifices. Changing the subject, the elder calls the protagonist's attention. Because despite wanting to say farewell with a smile, he has no choice but to ask for help, as the cursed seed was not eradicated with the elimination of the enemies. That day, Sada-sama brilliantly defeated the cursed seed, but the remnants of the enemy took over the spirits and new wicked monsters emerged. Since then, they have decided to call them crystal beasts, and after the village was set on fire, they had to take refuge in the volcanic tunnels. In the end, the Beastmen tribe was attacked once again and did not even have time to recover from their injuries. For that reason, he pleads for help, and as Mammon raises her voice to speak, the hero orders silence. At this moment, the Beastmen are weakened enough that they are no match for the crystal beasts. Understanding that he cannot leave his people in such a state, the protagonist decides to help. In the future, he is certain that he will need the help of the Beastmen as well. And from what he has heard, even these so-called crystal beasts could be a great opportunity to gain experience. Later, the elder guides the protagonist to a certain place, and the boy instructs Dadson to stay behind while he waits for good news. Right now, there is no way to know when the angels will attack again, so he wants to resolve this as quickly as possible. Suddenly, a rock falls from the sky, making a loud noise that startles Mammon a little. Additionally, another noise catches the protagonist's attention, making him curious. The wall of the cave was definitely not as close to them at the start as it is now. Then, at the last second, the boy realizes why. An attack is already coming his way. The Demon King manages to dodge, but Mammon still does not understand the gravity of the situation. Without thinking twice, Ichinose grabs the girl's hand and pulls her along as they run, warning her that it is not a wall. It is actually a level 70 crystal cobra, a giant serpent, nothing like a wall. Wasting no time, the snake attempts to swallow the two intruders, and during the chase, they give their all to avoid being caught. Facing such a massive serpent inside a cave is undeniably unfavorable, so the only option left is to retreat. By a stroke of luck, Mammon points to an exit, prompting both of them to use every ounce of strength to leap toward it. After stumbling and sliding, they finally manage to escape the snake's attack. Moreover, since it slithered in too deep, it should remain trapped there for quite some time. Shifting focus from the problem, Mammon shouts to warn that new enemies have appeared, and a herd of giant tigers emerges. One of them steps forward to face the protagonist, roaring in an attempt to intimidate him. However, despite being a dangerous beast, Ichinose actually feels excited to fight. Mammon's instinct at that moment is to step in front of her master, but suddenly, the tiger transforms into a docile kitten. The moment it rolls onto its back, the protagonist approaches to give it a pat. This is because, with the magical ability reward for achieving attributes, Ichinose successfully tamed the crystal beast. Later, the elder appears speechless at the Demon King's new companion, who is now obedient due to the magical beast's intimidation. After making the crystal beasts bow to his will and relying on their strength, the Beastmen village quickly regained its prosperity. Then Dadson bows, declaring that the Beast King's village will be eternally grateful to their lord. However, the elder still decides to make one last request, if it is not too much trouble. Since the village's former guardian idol was transformed into a surveillance statue by the angels, Dadson wishes for this situation to be reversed. For the protagonist, it seems easy enough, so he agrees. After all, as the saying goes, if you're in the rain, you might as well get wet. However, it appears that the original material was damaged by the eruption, which will make the restoration more difficult. Dadson then informs him that if the statue is touched by the Demon King's magic, it will be restored. Within seconds, the restoration truly begins and a pink energy shines throughout the entire region. But suddenly, the aura turns purple and the protagonist starts struggling to maintain the process. It seems that the residual presence of the former Demon King within the statue is rejecting the current Demon King himself. In this case, one of the citizens appears to suggest that this boy might not be the real Demon King. Mammon, on the other hand, cannot understand why Sada-sama would not be the king since he has the same scent. However, the same citizen remarks that the Demon King would not have been wounded by such a pathetic surprise attack and points out that his appearance is completely different. Ichinose, in turn, bears this pressure with immense rage because he refuses to be defeated after everything. However, it is a fact that the residual magic from this statue is linked to the old Sada, meaning that if their souls are different, there will be no way to interfere. This makes the boy even more frustrated with the rotten inheritance left behind by the former Demon King. If this is a soul-related issue, there are two possible solutions. The first is to find a way to trick the statue into believing he is Sada. The other, which is much easier, is simply to annihilate it by overloading it with the curse magic of all 7 races. Naturally, an intense clash begins between the two, and the system notifies that the effects of the curse have been added to the Demon King's power detection. In this case, the boy decides to go all in, and alongside the roar of the Beast King, multiple curses are activated at once. Thus, the old Demon King and the new one continue their aura battle. causing the energy to extend all the way to Mammon and Dadson. Then, with a determined shout, a massive explosion erupts, raising an enormous cloud of smoke. And finally, the statue transforms from the image of an angel into a replica of the protagonist, leaving all the citizens completely ecstatic. As a reward, our hero obtains the ability search in the Beast King's village, allowing him to investigate everything within the perimeter. In this case, he decides to test it out, and upon activating the ability, he immediately identifies the citizen who had been inciting discord. Quickly, the boy approaches the Beast Man, grabs him by the neck, and demands that he reveal his true identity. Then, as the infiltrator's disguise falls apart, angel wings emerge from his back. Naturally, the other citizens become enraged at having one of those Curse Angel clan members infiltrating their ranks and causing trouble. Therefore, despite the intruder's threats of Belle's retaliation if they harmed him, everyone gathered from all sides to punish him, even though the hero knew he wasn't lying. Ichino's comments that he needs to think of a way to remove the curse, and upon hearing this, Mammon realizes the instability and asks if the boy knows where Padrig is. Clearly, the protagonist does not understand at first, but he soon remembers that she was one of Sada's subordinates, known for removing curses and being connected to his soul. At that moment, the system opens a new mission, Return of the King within the Spirit Arc, with the objective of ascending and judging the spirits of the hidden eastern region. Thus, the protagonist asks Mammon if she has any idea where Padrig might be. However, the last time she saw her, she was flying northwest, which is the opposite direction, and since they only have 40 days for the mission, our hero knows it would be better to prioritize dispersing the curse and decides to head northwest. However, in a mysterious turn, the system secretly hopes the boy won't regret this decision. Later, out of nowhere, a blue portal opens in the sky, accompanied by bursts of energy, and from it emerges a man dressed in modern Earth clothing. Quickly, he realizes that he must be in the world of Deep Space Frontier, and that he has likely reincarnated. Then the system immediately appears, giving him a deadline of 3 months to defeat the Demon King, making him very excited to think that he is the protagonist of this world. With the mission to defeat the Demon King, the new hero's journey begins on an ancient battlefield. As he steps into the desert, disguised in a cloak, he realizes that this is the place. Then he shouts, demanding to know where Padrig is and announcing the return of the Demon King. But for some reason, the only response he hears is the sound of dust sweeping across the ground. Meanwhile, inside the palace, he comes across the exclusive equipment of the Demon King in its human form. A bit embarrassed, he asks where his greeting is, prompting the girl to obey without issue. In this case, the Lone Star Warrior, a level 97 player, takes pride in how well his disguise is working. The story of this boy is that he was suddenly summoned into another world. But he quickly realized that this world was the same as the game he had been playing, so he thought that as long as he had his knowledge, he would be able to handle everything. However, the boy quickly realized that other summoned people were interacting with the NPCs there. Because of that, to get ahead of them, he knew he needed to go after the item, and with great ambition, he decided to pursue Padrig, the most powerful one. Padrig is an incredibly cool piece of equipment for Sada, so the best approach was to disguise himself as the Demon King. As long as he could get his hands on her, the boy could definitely become a powerful protagonist. However, suddenly, things started to darken as if the boy were experiencing vertigo. Along with that, his vision began to fade, and this situation was entirely caused by the very item he was trying to steal. Showing clear disdain in her eyes, the girl summoned a magic circle around the intruder and slicing it in half, launched him away along with several other curious onlookers. With a malicious smile, she hoped he would be grateful for merely being finished off and buried. Naturally, the magic portal closed, and the girl began walking toward the center of the palace. There, she informed her master that she had eliminated yet another one who tried to tarnish the name of Sada-sama. In his mind, the Demon King silently thanked his weapon for a job well done. Padrig, however, warned that the number of intruders had been increasing lately, which was disgusting. But the Demon King told the girl not to be irritated. After all, she only needed to eliminate them all without leaving any traces. Back in that same street from before, the protagonist sneezed, making Mammon worried about her master's condition. Regardless, the boy assured her that he was fine and that they needed to find Padrig quickly since time was running out. More than a week had already passed since they set out, but if he could get the item, completing the mission would be much easier. Unexpectedly, a girl ran past and bumped into our hero, making him shout at her to be more careful. However, with an almost tearful expression, the girl desperately pleaded for help, and Mammon melted at the sight of her cuteness. Naturally, the protagonist was a bit confused about the situation. Soon 3 thugs appeared, telling them not to interfere, claiming that they had their eyes on the girl first. But unlike Ichinos, Mammon took offense at the sight of 3 brutes harassing a lady. For some reason, however, the protagonist stopped her, despite Mammon wanting to handle it on her own. Additionally, Ichinos suddenly pushed the so-called damsel in distress toward the thugs with a smile. Mammon immediately screamed, questioning if Sada was really going to let this slide, but the boy had a reason for refusing to help. The girl in turn jumped onto Ichinos again, pleading for help. However, while the thugs tried to assert dominance, the protagonist knew something was wrong because this girl was Yaju from the Black Moon clan. Noticing this resistance, the girl thought that Sada was different from the rumors that portrayed him as the savior of the Beastmen tribe. The protagonist did everything he could to keep her from getting close. Realizing this, the girl decided it would be better to change her strategy despite wanting to avoid taking action in such a crowded place. Once again, the thugs grabbed the girl, trying to take her somewhere private. However, this time the girl's expression changed. She now had the piercing gaze of a wild wolf, leaving the thugs completely terrified. Frightened, they ran away, shouting that they would let her escape this time, which was nothing more than the classic strategic retreat of cowards. The girl then threw herself onto Sada once again, thanking him for saving her and vowing to dedicate her life to repaying his kindness. Since she didn't know the full extent of the hero's abilities, she understood that attacking now would be risky, so she tried to stay by his side as an ally instead. Unexpectedly, the protagonist accepted her into the group, believing it was better to keep his enemies close. Now the next stop would be the ancient battlefield, and while Yeju expressed her gratitude for the boy's decision, Mammon shouted at them to wait for her. However, behind the scenes, a silent war was brewing between the two. In the outskirts of the battlefield, the hero was infuriated. This place was supposed to be a desolate wasteland. Instead, a chaotic festival was taking place, filled with shady merchants selling dubious goods. Among the citizens, a man suddenly walked past, planted a sign into the ground, and stepped back. The sign read, "The last line of Padred challengers must go to the back of the queue." Ichinos was utterly confused. To clarify, the man explained that the number of people searching for the item had recently increased, so they had formed a group to manage them. Because of this, he said that if the boy entered the line now, he would be able to challenge Padred in about 2 months. However, the hero shouts, asking if there isn't a faster way, so the man informs Ichinos that he can join a team if they are missing members. In this case, the protagonist feels defeated, but Mammon tries to cheer him up by saying she will help find a group. Yaju, on the other hand, finds it strange that the Demon King is planning to fight against his own equipment instead of simply controlling it. Thinking that he is weaker than expected, she believes this might be her chance. Besides, there are many people around who could help. Sometime later, Mammon informs them that she couldn't find anyone willing to accept them, so the hero says they will handle it calmly. Then suddenly, a person sends a message asking if the boy is Ichinos. This person, Gachao, a level 88 hero, is extremely excited to see his idol, and at that moment, Ichinos discovers the existence of other summoned individuals. Quickly, Gachu grabs the boy's hand, recalling how worried he was when Ichinos disappeared during his last live stream. However, the protagonist questions who they are, which makes the blonde ask if Ichinos has not yet encountered other players. In this case, the hero becomes irritated by this mass summoning, while Mammon innocently asks what these people are talking about. It seems the girl has no knowledge of the players, which could indicate that this is something controlled by the system. Getting straight to the point, Gachu suggests that the protagonist join them as they are all experienced and friendly. Then Sweet, a level 75 cleric, comments on Mammon's outfit, while Phoenix, a level 78 mage, interacts with Yaju. They mention that they will head to the ancient battlefield tomorrow, and Gachu is confident that they will win with Ichinos as an ally. Additionally, he explains that they will distribute resources using dice rolls, and after some thought, the hero decides to join the players' group. While they walk, the protagonist asks about the summoning of the others, and the blonde explains that after Ichinos disappeared, no one was able to play anymore. Then, after a few days, an update was released, and everyone who clicked on a certain notification ended up here. This matches exactly with the day the protagonist ignored the system's warning and decided to head north. Sugi asks if they received a mission, and Gechu reveals that all of them have been tasked with killing the Demon King Sada. At that moment, Mammon screams for her master, and the boy realizes that the system is truly cursed. As if that weren't enough, enemy archers suddenly appear on top of the castle. And behind him, the protagonist senses that he could be attacked at any moment. At that instant, the blonde pauses, commenting that the armor Ichinos is wearing is Sada's armor, and obviously, acquiring something like that would take incredible luck. In this case, he asks Ichinos directly what happened to Sada after he defeated him. Clearly, these false allies already know the hero's true identity, and now there are two dangers to deal with. With a completely relaxed expression, the protagonist refuses to answer. Then, both the mage and the cleric attempt to take the girls hostage to get what they want. Without pushing the matter too much, the blonde comments that he is already happy just to be with someone he admires so much. Raising his axe, he then orders all the archers to fire, and in an instant, the arrows rush toward the protagonist. Mammon tries to scream to warn her master while being restrained by the cleric. However, the protagonist does not need her warning. Using his shadow essence, he increases his speed by 30%, effortlessly dodging all the arrows. Immediately, he positions himself behind Yagyu, saying that just watching things unfold is boring. So he pushes the girl forward, telling her it's time for her to take a risk to save him. Yaju, in turn, couldn't even perceive the moment Ichinos appeared behind her, and now she was caught in the crossfire between the players and the Demon King. At that moment, the protagonist thought it would be fun to observe the peasants from above, like a true king. Logically, the girl tries to say something to get out of that unfavorable position. However, playing the role of a perfect actor, the protagonist asks if she wasn't the one who said she would punish these chickens for being disrespectful. And before she could even deny the accusation, the blonde lunged at her, provoking her to carry out this so-called punishment personally. However, at the moment the boy landed a strike on Yeju, the girl disappeared, revealing that it was merely an illusion. Immediately, Yeju repositioned herself, trying to convince the blonde that she was not an ally of that man. But since they had been following them all day, Gachu believed the girl was lying while trying to figure out how to deal with her speed. Either way, the girl knew she couldn't reveal her identity yet, and the boy didn't think twice before attacking once again. Yeju needed to defend herself to stay alive and quickly understood that she had to extinguish the sparks fallen onto her. In this case, the protagonist simply watched everything with excitement, because the more chaotic the environment became, the better his chances of escaping. Seeing this, the mage attempted a sneak attack, but Ichinos advised her to help her companion first. After all, since Yeju had grasped her situation, she started fighting seriously, completely shifting the balance of power in the battle. To start, the protagonist declared that if he had wanted to run away, he would have done so already, then urged the mage to help immediately. At that moment, the teammates exchanged glances and understood what they had to do, combining the cleric's healing with the mage's attack magic. Instantly, 30% of the blonde's HP was restored, and his speed increased by 10% for 5 minutes. Additionally, the skill Nightmare Eye immobilized the target for 3 seconds, allowing Gachu to charge in to end the duel once and for all. However, the girl called him an imbecile, and before he could finish his attack, the boy was completely immobilized. That was because he had already been poisoned and was now in an advanced state of degradation. As a result, Gachu collapsed to the ground, defeated to the despair of his companions. Despite the cleric's efforts, due to her low level, she could not use effective healing magic. The mage, in turn, criticized the cheap trick and demanded the antidote, but Yeju reminded them that they were the ones who started this fight. At this, Ichinos asked himself if, after being poisoned by her hidden weapons, those two idiots still hadn't realized it. The mage then questioned if the girl was from the Yeju family, and in desperation, she begged to save the commander in exchange for a spot in the queue. However, the antidote had never existed in the game, and Yeju became slightly irritated that Ichinos already knew her identity. The hero, in turn, revealed that he knew everything about the Order of Angels and invited her to have some fun with him. But the girl slapped the protagonist's hand, telling him not to make a fool out of her. At that moment, Ichinos released a portion of his aura and warned that she had no choice. With such a threatening aura, it was clear that he was truly a demon king, and since she was not yet a match for him, she agreed to follow him. Smiling, the protagonist then ordered her to hand over the antidote to the blonde. Understanding that she could not refuse, she threw her trump card onto Gachu's back, ensuring that it would neutralize the poison. With that, the mage admitted defeat and, as promised, handed over the pass to the ancient battlefield. Quickly, the poison was neutralized, but the blonde questioned why he had been saved. As silence filled the air, everyone waited for a response, and the protagonist seemed like he was about to explain something. However, instead of words, he decided to show through his actions, and the next day, everyone involved was assigned to serve Ichinos on the journey. The mage, now acting more obediently, offered her new chief some chilled watermelon, which the hero accepted with gratitude. Excited, the blonde announced that they had fought in this very place against another team and asked if their leader intended to recruit more allies. The protagonist, however, casually remarked that he was merely supervising their mission. He'd assured them that if they managed to defeat Padrig, he, as an administrator, would reward their efforts. But in truth, Ichinos had no such authority, yet the players were far too easy to deceive. The previous day, the protagonist had received the right to challenge Padrig from the mage, but instead of using it, he returned it to her, leaving her completely shocked. With a smirk, he told them that they had passed the test and could proceed with their mission normally, which naturally confused the entire group. Additionally, he claimed that his role as an administrator was to identify and support the right people for the challenge, which was, of course, a total lie. However, the players were impressed, believing that the boy was some kind of GM, while Ichinos was only doing this to gather more information. In this case, he informed them that he might look for other participants, prompting Gachu to shout that he wasn't doubting him, he just wanted to clarify a few things. The protagonist then asked if he wanted proof, and the blonde, slightly embarrassed, admitted that he did. Because of this, Ichinos told the mage to launch an attack. However, she hesitated, feeling a bit scared, which irritated the hero, who then ordered her to attack immediately. The cleric, for her part, doesn't understand what's happening, and neither does her friend. However, even if just for a brief moment, they originally came here to defeat Ichinos. Because of that, she gives it her all to launch a fireball, and as it approaches, the protagonist praises her magic. However, since his opponent is now the new demon king of this world, he activates Deep Sin, which envelops the enemy's magic in an aura of absolute cold. Thus, all the fireballs are frozen and repelled, forcing the mage to create a flaming wall to protect herself. Even so, she is struck and sent flying into the wall, completely defeated. It is said that there are no techniques in this game that can change an opponent's attribute, so if a boy can do this, it is a sign that he is truly an administrator. Because of that, the hero signals for them not to spread this information to anyone. While asking Mammon to pull the girl out of the ice, he thinks about how Demon King techniques combined with his trickery are an amazing combo. Additionally, the boy has been learning several new abilities, such as Echo of the Abyssal Depths. In just a few words, Yeju understands that the protagonist converted his enemies into allies, but she knew that Sada would never do something like that out of kindness. Mammon, however, grumbles that she isn't happy about having to help someone who attacked her master. Back to the topic of the reward, Ichinos tries to convince the blonde with any excuse that seems logical. He tells them to consider what just happened as a clue. However, Gacho doesn't understand how rewards relate to the fights, and the cleric suggests that it might be something related to ice or poison. Meanwhile, the mage manages to conclude that they will defeat the Demon King and his traitorous servants, causing the group to agree. Gacho, excited, comments that the Demon King always reincarnates, so if they steal his servants to weaken him, it will be much easier. In this case, the blonde once again asks for more clues about the reward. With the most shameless expression, the protagonist guarantees that whoever completes the objective will be able to take something from this world. Naturally, the players light up with excitement, thinking they will get rich if they obtain any treasure. While traveling through the battlefield, a group of adventurers is fighting against a stone monster. At one point, Mammon asks if her master really intends to help these people. The protagonist simply signals for her to stay quiet and advises her to watch and see. Suddenly, a powerful tornado erupts, and a warrior warns his companion to be careful. However, a silhouette starts to appear from within it, and emerging from the storm is the Demon King wielding his weapon. At that moment, Padre begins to sense a very familiar scent, instantly becoming irritated, realizing that it had finally decided to show up. Standing before the protagonist alongside the original Demon King, the girl calls Ichinos a pathetic imposter. With the presence of the Lord, the monsters on the battlefield immediately stop fighting, and then they start running away in terror. The blonde, along with the other adventurers, questions why the monsters are fleeing. Mammon observes that the monsters are behaving strangely, while Yeju warns that she senses a very powerful presence approaching. As far as she remembers, the monsters in this desert are at most level 70, so there should be no reason to be this worried. However, as the sandstorm clears, enemies far stronger than mere beasts begin to appear. Among them, Padre quickly recognizes and calls out to Mammon, who responds by shouting her former comrade's name. Additionally, she notices the presence of the Demon King standing alongside his weapon, leaving her completely confused. Regardless, one of the adventurers sees this as an opportunity and charges in to attack. He leaps as high as he can, and Padre calmly asks her master for permission to erase this fool from existence. With the Demon King giving no response, it is subtly understood that he grants permission. Watching the two Demon Kings, Mammon grows even more confused, unsure of what exactly is happening. Meanwhile, Ichinos realizes that Sada's appearance is identical to the original, but their auras are considerably weaker, meaning that something is wrong. Back to the reckless adventurer, he attempts to land a punch from behind, but Padre simply obliterates him with a single movement. At that moment, the other warriors try to provide long-range support, launching explosive attacks while anxiously waiting for the result. However, Padre suddenly emerges from the smoke, appearing directly in front of one of the adventurers, and strikes him with unimaginable force. Thus, there goes the second fool who dared to challenge her. But the adventurers are not afraid and charge forward, thinking they can win as a group. In response, the girl counterattacks all of them at once, mocking their foolishness. Meanwhile, Ichinos activates Beast Intimidation, and suddenly, the girl's body begins to feel heavy. This enrages Padre, furious that a cheap imitation is copying one of her king's techniques. Without hesitation, she dashes forward to eliminate the imposter. She is stopped by Mammon, who tries to reason with her. However, Padre sees her former companion as nothing more than a traitor who must also be eliminated. Witnessing all of this, the blonde realizes that this fight is far beyond what they can handle. Seeing this, the hero asks Gachu if he's really going to give up after all the effort they put into distracting her. Meanwhile, Yaji realizes that she won't have to deal with Fumizuki after all and tries to slip away from this lost battle. Even so, she can't help but admire Padre's power and durability, which could rival Sada's body. As she fights, Mammon shouts that she is here to bring back her former companion. But Padre coldly responds that their souls are completely different, to which Mammon strongly disagrees, claiming it is the exact same spirit. If that were true, Padre questions why the girl is fighting against her. Unable to answer, Mammon leaves an opening in her defenses, an opportunity that Padre does not miss, moving in to end the fight. With victory in her hands, Padre scoffs that her former comrade is so foolish that she isn't even worth finishing off. Turning her attention back to the imposter Demon King, she mocks Ichinos, saying that he doesn't seem very popular since his allies have fled. Even though the girl is weaker than before, she still hasn't suffered a single scratch. Then, with brutal honesty, the protagonist remarks that this white-haired man is not Sada, and that it's unrealistic for him to have kept only one subordinate for 100 years. At this, Padre becomes angrier than ever, and with destructive intent in her eyes, she declares that she will end Ichinos. In a rapid charge, the girl rushes toward her target, but Ichinos gives the signal for everyone to act. The group ambush, however, does not concern Padre. To her, this is nothing more than a cheap trick. Yet for some reason, all the energy blasts are not directed at her, They are aimed at the protagonist himself. Feeling offended, the hero snaps at Padraig, telling her to stop thinking so highly of herself. Due to the fire attribute damage, Colossal Dragon's Breath is activated. Due to the water attribute damage, Grudge of the Depths also activates. Additionally, with lightning attribute damage, Scorn of the Sages emerges, and with a full set of ancestral curses, our hero is ready. Immediately, all 3 curses enter the battle, unleashing a ruthless assault on the girl, causing an explosion that makes Ichinose curious about the outcome. As the smoke clears, Padraig is seen exhausted, sitting on the ground without strength. Seeing this, the adventurers begin celebrating their victory. But while observing from a safe distance, Yeju mutters that the Demon King should not have that technique. Back in the fight, the protagonist asks if the girl will surrender or be destroyed, but she whispers something he can't quite hear. Apologizing to the Demon King, Padraig announces that she must reclaim her powers. In the midst of the confusion, the adventurers notice a shift in Sada's aura, which Ichinose knows is fake. From that false Demon King, a massive energy begins to take shape, turning into the spirit of a colossal dragon. Then it suddenly charges toward Padraig at high speed, prompting the protagonist to shout for everyone to stop the dragon from reaching her. Attempting to use Taunt, the system notifies him that the enemy is out of range. The protagonist doesn't understand. The spirit definitely belongs to the girl, so he concludes that this must be the Soul Divide ability. However, using this technique reduces the main body's power to 30%, making Ichinose increasingly concerned about his true potential. Soul Divide is a soul separation technique that causes immense pain and weakness. And to make matters worse, it's a risky ability that requires magic replenishment, proving the extreme level of loyalty the girl has. Regardless, Ichinose shouts that they will attack again, but seeing all that aura, the blonde questions if it's already too late for that. Just by reclaiming her powers, a violent gust of wind erupts, almost blowing the adventurers away, a clear demonstration of her immense spirit force. Then Yeju begins to understand Padraig's true strength, and with her hands transformed, the girl prepares for her first strike. At that moment, Gachu shouts for his companions not to fear and to set up a defensive line, but the girl simply dashes through them, shattering his weapon. Stepping back, the blonde becomes completely desperate at this demonstration of power, especially since his weapon wasn't the only thing that was broken. Without a shred of mercy, Padraig crushes the vital center of the boy, causing him to collapse, utterly defeated. Seeing this, all the adventurers begin to lose hope, considering a collective surrender. However, Padraig turns around with a threatening expression, finding their false hope amusing, because surrender is something she will never accept. Now, approaching the false Demon King, the girl asks if he has any last words, but the protagonist simply replies that he's tougher than that, and unlocks his full power for 5 minutes. Using a combination of the Rock Guard ability with Blood Ruin, White Bone Inferno is born. After piercing her, the boy begins gloating, declaring that there is no escaping from such a never-before-seen technique combination. However, the girl shrugs it off, stating that she doesn't need to escape. At that moment, the system notifies that because Padraig is linked to Sada, it is impossible to use those techniques against her. Inevitably, Ichinose faces defeat, and though he doesn't know where the girl learned about him, the weapon informs him that she has a non-aggression pact with Sada. Seeing this, Mammon rushes toward the protagonist to help him. But unfortunately, she suffers the same fate as Gachu, leaving Ichinose completely confused, since she should have already realized he wasn't Sada. Then, in her final moments, the girl tells him that by saving the Beastmen tribe, Ichinose has become her king. However, the fact that the girl is being so kind when his only goal was to use her to return home fills the protagonist with rage. With his eyes glowing with power, he declares in his mind that he won't let things end like this. Suddenly, the protagonist wakes up startled, lying on a red carpet. As he sits up, he notices a stone statue of himself, his chest pierced. Standing up, it becomes clear that this is his exact situation from a short while ago. Looking around, he sees that there are multiple statues just like this, and all of them are him. In this case, the hero believes that this is his wheel of life, a representation of his near-death experience. He then walks through the area, eventually arriving at the throne where Sada should be. There, the true Demon King appears, commenting that this Wheel of Life is quite an interesting concept. In response, the protagonist questions if it is really Sada who is manipulating this strange illusion, and demands to know why he is here. The Demon King simply points at the boy, saying that he was the one who wished for this. Naturally, the hero asks what Sada means by that. Then the demon reminds him that Ichinose lamented being too weak and wished for power. Furthermore, Mammon also regretted not being able to protect him. So Sada suggested that Ichinose surrender his body in order to save everyone. Hearing this, the protagonist asks who this entity really is. Without any mystery, the demon explains that he is the memory of the Demon King carved into consciousness. Naturally, Ichinose finds this amusing, sarcastically mocking the idea, asking what a mere consciousness parasite could even do. However, suddenly a jet of fire blasts past the protagonist's face, exploding behind him. With smoke still rising from his fingertip, the memory states that it can do everything the boy cannot. In response, the hero becomes a little more intrigued, realizing that this might not actually be a bluff. Sada then orders the boy to sit upon the throne in the center of the chamber. He explains that if Ichinos chooses to abandon his ego and merge with the memory to become the true demon king, he will be able to break the seal on his powers. However, at first the protagonist refuses, stating that he prefers to do things his own way. But then the statues around him begin questioning this decision, reminding him that if he hadn't rejected the offer before, he would have already unlocked his energy. And if that had happened, Mammon wouldn't have been destroyed by Padraig. The voices grew louder, increasing the criticism within the hero's mind, until finally he understands, if not for his own choices, none of this would have happened. In this case, anyone would be better than him, and if he could change, that would be fine. Seeing this, the memory agrees, stating that it doesn't have to be Ichinos who solves everything. Besides that, Sada, already out of patience, sends the hero to the throne since everyone is waiting for him. Little by little, the protagonist begins to climb the stairs, and the memory of the Demon King flashes a wide smile. However, before completing the ascent, Ichinos states that he was joking, and that he already knew Sada's goal was to take over his body. Then, in a swift movement, the hero grabs the Demon King's arm and lands a blow that brutally slams him into the ground. Next, drawing the sword from Sada's sheath, the boy positions himself on top, declaring that he will not be controlled by anyone. Moreover, since he saw no rules stating that only the true king could defeat Padraig, the hero does not hold back in defeating Sada a second time. However, the memory is certain that Ichinos will regret it because now both souls will not be recognized as the same. Yet the hero does not care because when the strongest player wants power, he takes it himself. It had only been for an instant, but Ichinos managed to return and could not stop wondering if that was truly Sada. Thinking about it, the boy had already been in a similar situation before and should have disappeared when devoured by Chaos Seed, but something happened to revive him. Due to the effect of Jingen, the angel's curse is reversed into the angel's blessing, and now it is possible to use the special state natural disaster. At that time, the protagonist had been so obsessed with gaining power that he had not even noticed, but the conditions were the same for being reborn, increasing his strength. Faced with this, Sada's memory tried to argue that he was responsible for the summoning. However, our hero no longer believed that and was beginning to doubt whether this was truly the Demon King. Then Sada tried to plead for mercy, claiming that his power would be necessary, but Ichinos knew that the real Sada would never lower himself so much. For that reason, our hero decided to repeat the previous phase, stating that he would do everything Sada could not, and this allowed him to acquire a soul secret. Back in the real world, Padraig mocks the imposter, saying this is what happens when one mocks his master. Additionally, she becomes irritated that Sada's armor is dirty with the boy's blood and mud. However, just as she is about to touch him, the protagonist wakes up, grabbing her wrist, and he jokingly says that she is in too much of a hurry to take his clothes off. Obviously, the girl cannot believe that the imposter is still alive. Annoyed by the protagonist's persistence, Padraig lunges with the blade from her body to finish him off again and delivers a fatal stab to the boy. Because of this, she mocks him once more, saying that the problem should now be solved. However, not only does Ichinos not die, but he also laughs at the situation, saying that the girl is scared. Naturally, Padraig laughs even more and warns that if the boy is counting on his companions, he can give up hope. But that was not a bluff, as suddenly, Mammon appeared alive and ready to strike from behind. Without even thinking, she grabbed the girl's tail, leaving her unable to understand what was happening. However, this was actually the Soul Division ability, and even as a clone, Mammon managed to launch Padraig far away. As she suffers the impact, the girl realizes that her former companion's strength is at least 10 times greater. All of this happened because when Mammon said she would continue with him despite knowing his identity, she became Ichinos' companion. And thanks to this luck, a protagonist was able to use this ability. Moreover, Ichinos does not intend to let Mammon lose, as he sarcastically asks if Sada cannot do something like that. After thinking for a moment, Padraig decides to summon her dragon to measure how strong the girl really is. In a swift charge, the Crimson Dragon leaps onto the enemies, causing a wave of smoke. And as their presence vanishes, Padraig assumes they were absorbed by the spiritual energy. However, suddenly, a blue lightning bolt crashes from the sky, causing destruction in the area and making the girl retreat. Then, amidst the dust, the silhouette of a powerful person appears, and the system announces that the Soul Division fusion has been successful. Now clad in a new look, protagonist apologizes for the delay and lands a powerful punch on Padraig, sending her flying far away and destroying the ground in her path. Severely wounded, the girl asks what kind of technique that was. Without intending to hide anything, our hero extends his hand to her, saying he will teach her if she becomes his equipment. Obviously, Padraig sees this deal as an affront and charges forward, declaring that she will only be used by the king. Thus, an exchange of extremely strong and fast blows between the two begins, until, amid the dodges, Ichinos decides to provoke her by saying that Sada lost to him and counterattacks with a low kick. In this case, even feeling the impacts, Padraig orders the imposter to shut up and dashes forward, saying that she will make the boy pay for this disrespect. However, with a look of pity, Ichinos asks the girl to stop being so dramatic. After all, he believed she had already realized that he was stronger than the Sada she knew. Even though it irritated her, the girl could not deny it. While Patrick is agitated, the protagonist takes advantage of the openings to his benefit, and the girl cannot understand how she is being shaken by the words of an imposter. Regardless, the protagonist continues attacking and commands her to make a choice, serve or succumb. Then Patrick gathers her strength to reject the proposal and is launched far away once again. However, the girl insists that Sada was much stronger, and that even the virtue of their souls was different. Still, Patrick fully understands that she needs to find a weakness as soon as possible. Ikinos, on the other hand, mocks this concept of soul virtue since Sada is a demon. Therefore, Patrick screams, ordering the boy to shut up and not to speak based on his mediocre life. In the past, the girl refused to join a being of darkness, but Sada told her that they had both already done horrible things. Because of that, as two demons hated by the world, the king invited her to share that burden together. Thus, a warm light shone for the girl who had lived in the shadows, and back in battle, Ichinos suddenly vanishes, only to reappear behind the girl, stating that he will continue until she becomes his companion. Patrick even tries to react, but the protagonist is fast enough to land a kick first, causing a devastating explosion. At this point, he asks if the girl has changed her mind. Like a magical item, she was regenerated by all races, and being the only one who completely accepted and embraced Sada, it was already clear that her loyalty to her master had never wavered. But to heal Padraig's loneliness and make her fall so deeply in love, even the king's charisma was at the level of a demon king. Little by little, the girl begins to rise and the protagonist shows excitement. However, Padraig still does not intend to surrender, and therefore, using her dragon soul, she decides to break the boy's defenses from the inside since attacking from the outside is not working. Shortly after, the dragon's herald begins to search through the memories of our hero. Among them, Padraig sees moments of family arguments while the protagonist played, and moments of conflict with Ichinos himself for doing nothing in life besides gaming. Even with so much equipment, he kept losing to Sada, but never thought about giving up. Thus, he fought against the Demon King many times, engaging in difficult but friendly battles. Then Padraig realized that she had never seen her master with such an intense smile and began to wonder if she was wrong. At that moment, the protagonist himself appears within her mind to ask if Padraig is satisfied, and since his privacy is being violated, he orders her to get out of his sight, expelling her from his memories. Now that she has seen his secret, Ichinos extends his hand to the girl because since Sada is no longer there, he wants to keep Padraig company. And after seeing how her master treated that imposter, the girl finally gave in and accepted, transforming into a sword. Thus, a system notification appears congratulating him on his new achievement, and it informs that Padraig is a Demon King's equipment that, due to its nature, carries half of the curse. In any case, the protagonist decides to test its power, and with a single movement, the clouds are split in half, leaving him very satisfied. Furthermore, the time limit on the soul division ability expires, causing Mammon to leave Ichinos' body along with a dense blue energy. She then hugs the protagonist, happy that he has completed the mission. And while the system announces that half of the character's data is now available, the mission time limit is updated to 10 days. After the battle to conquer Padraig, the protagonist reaches level 50 and is exhausted. However, at that exact moment, Fumizuki Yeju approaches, trying to take advantage of the situation. But now Padraig is there to protect the boy, so the ninja runs off, making up an excuse to escape. Anyway, the excuses did not work, so Yeju had to sign a paper stating that she would not complete the mission. Padraig, in turn, announces that she will remain in weapon form for a while since she has expended a considerable amount of power. Then she threatens him, ordering him to wield her with great respect. Thus, the protagonist tells Fumizuki to get up so they can leave, which leaves her very confused. Because of this, he asks if she has already given up on defeating him, but with a shout, the girl declares that she never will. And so, Yeju runs after Ichinos, telling him not to underestimate the Black Moon clan. Since he is the Demon King, the protagonist thinks he will need to gather the 7 great clans again. And upon seeing his thoughtful expression, Yeju still cannot understand the hero's reasoning. With the end of that difficult battle, Mammon takes the opportunity to eat as much as she can. Meanwhile, the protagonist reflects on the system pitting him against the players. Currently, there are 3 major forces in the game: the players, the system itself, and the boy. Moreover, the mission given to him by the system is to subjugate each of the clans and reclaim the Demon King's original power. Meanwhile, the players have received the mission to defeat the Demon King, and they are all searching for Sada. Naturally, they are planning to defeat Ichinos, drawn by some kind of reward or incentive. But based on what he saw in the Demon King's memories on another occasion, all the players now recognize him as the Demon King himself. In other words, this means that the system is not on our hero's side. And since he never saw the system's introduction upon entering the game, the boy decided to seek out Padraig first to conquer her. At the moment Mammon gave him the weapon's location, he ignored the system's instructions and went in the opposite direction. Shortly after, the players were sent after him, which means the system might be trying to control his actions. Ichinos was turned into the Demon King by this technology, and now it is trying to eliminate him using the players. That is why the king in the mission Return of the King is most likely the boy himself. And if that is the case, even if he successfully completes the objective, it is still unclear whether he will be able to return to his world. Furthermore, after overhearing a conversation about adventurers stealing resources, it becomes even clearer that the system is increasing the number of players. Obviously, the boy needs to deal with this, but even the NPCs will likely join the battle in the future out of curiosity. That is because adventurers offer reward distribution as well as a salary when there are no missions, which is quite appealing. Clearly, it seems like a good thing, but there are some strange aspects to these excessive benefits. On the other hand, if a person does not enlist, it will not have access to supplies, which is rather unfair. Whatever the case, the protagonist thinks he will need to hurry to complete the mission because if the players grow stronger, they will break the balance of the 7 clans. Thus, Ichino stands up and calls the two to leave. However, since the Demon King's expression changed quickly after hearing the conversation, the girl realizes that the adventurers could be a threat to Sada and something that might be useful to her. Later, they all continue walking to complete the mission and are now in the Elven Forest. Among the countless trees and dense nature, Mammon finds it strange that everything is so quiet. Besides the spirits not being there are clear signs of battle in the region. However, in addition to that, there are also signs of corrosion with black stains on the ground, which means that the rumor from before might really be true. Our hero, in turn, becomes a bit curious about what happened and decides to head to the Elves' Tree of Life. However, at that exact moment, the local residents appear at high speed, and one of them not only aims but also fires an arrow at Yaju. In its trajectory, the girl believes that if she dodges, the arrow might hit the Demon King. So that is exactly what she does, and the projectile indeed hits the protagonist directly, leaving Mammon desperate. However, Fumizuki finds it a bit strange that it was so easy. And she is right because Ichinos manages to catch the arrow effortlessly before it hits him. In this case, the elves shout that they need to report this to the tribe, but Yeju realizes that she is just being used again. That is because now the three have begun fighting against the girl with everything they have. And when Mammon goes to check on her master, he tells her to be quiet, saying he did that to distract the elves. Naturally, the girl from the Black Moon clan easily defeats the first of them. And so, one of the elves panics, but the other orders when to focus on the enemy first. Since the spiritual race manipulates nature, their power is quite troublesome for Fumizuki. Meanwhile, back to the defeated boy, our hero extends his hand greeting him. And while apologizing for the rough welcome, he asks what's happening there for there to be so few of them. But the elf does not seem comfortable answering. Because of this, he states that he is not obligated to say anything, but even so, it is no secret that they are the last remaining spirits. In this case, the protagonist asks if he can help, especially since he knows that doing so would immediately complete his mission. Naturally, the elf becomes a bit curious about this offer of help. Back in the duel, Yeju lands a kick on another of the elves and quickly brings her blade close to subdue him. However, before she can do anything, a mass of dark energy appears, forcing her to retreat. At this moment, the girl shouts, questioning what the hero is doing, because if he does not finish them off, they will do it to her. Then Ichino's comments that there must be some misunderstanding and suggests they sit down for a conversation. Yaju, in turn, had already heard rumors that the spirits were isolated and desperate, so it would make sense for the Demon King to help them. Because of this, the other elves ask if the protagonist truly wants to help. And with a smile, our hero says yes. However, in the past, others have said the same but never kept their promises. Suddenly, Yaju begins to sense a sinister smell and shouts to warn the rest of the group. Then a type of black miasma starts to approach, and the girl immediately orders everyone to climb the trees. However, the elves stay and stand alongside the Demon King, commenting that if they manage to survive this, they might give him another chance to earn their trust. In this case, Yeju hopes that the protagonist can prove his charisma through actions, and at the moment the first attack is seen, Echinos shouts to warn Mammon. However, he does not just warn her, he also counters the charge, and without understanding what this aura is, it starts clinging to Padru's body. Because of this, Ichinos communicates with Mammon through his gaze, and soon the two charge into battle, alongside the elves, who, working together, will not let that being escape. Padraig, in turn, asks if this liquid is a monster, and since the sword sensed something strange, it is certainly not something simple. Then to satisfy everyone's curiosity, a giant monster appears, and with an immense aura, it is revealed as a fallen spirit. 100 years ago, during the war between gods and demons, the sacred tree of the spirits, which served as the elves' bridge of faith, was cut down by the angels. Without the sacred tree, they lost the power they once had and were inevitably expelled from their own home. Even when they were sold as slaves, they never had hope for a better day. It was thanks to their clan brothers that the sacred tree began to show signs of revitalization. But at that moment, they returned to halt the elves' progress and put them at a disadvantage once again. The angels claim that the fact they worship a mere tree proved the pathetic nature of their people. Then, in fury, the elder used the forbidden corruption technique to fight back, which naturally turned him into a fallen spirit. A spirit like that always gains immense power, but in exchange loses all traces of sanity. Over time, the only thing that remained for the Elder was to devour all life in his path until he became a true monster. And even though they stopped the enemy's advance, the loved ones they lost would never return. In the end, the true enemy is the angels, so Mammon shouts that they should not fight against each other. Ichinos thinks that the angels' behavior has changed a lot since the last time he played this game. Furthermore, since these are the last remaining souls and they have already surrendered, this means that the hero has conquered the spiritual race. However, one of the elves asks Ichinos to save the others as well since they are part of the same family. Clearly, Yaju notices that something is off about this story. Not being able to save their companions is something they share with the Black Moon clan, but her clan never reached this level of despair. Because of this, it is difficult to understand how they can trust someone who has conquered so many. After thinking, Yagyu states that this story is ridiculous and tells the protagonist that from the very beginning, there was never a way to save them. Back in the battle, a monster attacks with extensions of its body, and while dodging, the elves react with their elemental powers. However, all the damage dealt is immediately regenerated by the monster, leaving everyone frightened. Then the spirit prepares another charge, but the protagonist dashes forward to save the two despite the system trying to stop him. Saving everything will definitely be difficult, and based on what has happened so far, earning the spirit's trust will be even harder. But even so, it is not impossible even with an enemy that appears to have no weaknesses. Yaju, in turn, shouts that they are dealing with a fallen spirit, which even angels cannot defeat. However, the protagonist thinks this is perfect because he is a demon king who is stronger than the angels. Thus, the boy begins to use his weapon to attack, spinning 360 degrees to strike all the clones at once. And this way, Ichinos announces that he will be counting on Padre to win. Since her attacks are dangerous, he asks her not to hit him, and obviously, the girl does not harm her master but targets the monsters instead. Next, the protagonist slashes one of them in half, but Mammon yells at Ichinos to put in more effort. One of the elves in turn believes that the Demon King will not succeed. To explain, he simply tells the girl to observe, which truly frightens her. From atop the tree, it is possible to see several severed limbs of the monster, but in an instant, they regenerate into the same body. Thus, a physical resistance ability is triggered, increasing the level of danger. To counter this, the protagonist unlocks his net abilities for 5 minutes, and he uses Purgatory of Bones as his first attack, which instantly envelops the spirit completely. Furthermore, some damage can be seen, making one of the elves excited while the other two are impressed by the Demon King's power. However, the protagonist remains proud, saying that this is the bare minimum for a king. Still, he believes he may have overdone it a little, but suddenly, a new formation of energy startles our hero, because as it concentrates, the fallen spirit begins to reappear. However, this time is even stronger, transforming into a super fallen spirit, changing Ichinos' expression to one of despair. Faced with this, Yeju decides to act as the boy does not know the legend passed down for centuries. Realizing this is her chance, she charges forward, but the protagonist reacts by ordering her to stay quiet. In any case, it was an illusion, so Yeju mocks Ichinos for forgetting about her technique. Thus, the hero actually strikes the spirit, and the girl pushes it even further toward its end. According to legend, fallen spirits are immortal and absorb all the vitality and mana around them to merge, so she bids farewell to the Demon King. Mammon desperately tries to save her master, but she is stopped by the elves, who do not let her take the risk. One of the elves in turn begins to lose hope as even the Demon King cannot break the curse. Stuffy believes that both the old king and the new one are frauds, and if nothing works, the elf resigns himself to his fate, believing they must return to where they came from. However, his friend shouts as loud as he can for Clean not to give up yet. But Yeju understands what the boy is feeling because to her, living a lonely life after losing her home and companion is not worth it. With that, Clean gives in, happy to finally be able to reunite with his old comrades and slowly moves forward to be devoured by the monster. However, before he can be assimilated, a hand grabs his neck, ordering him not to give up on life. Is our protagonist, who not only has not been defeated, but also has enough strength to save the elf. Mammon is immensely happy that her master is safe, but Ichinos scolds her, saying she needs to have more faith in his abilities. Yaju, in turn, does not understand anything and asks if the information was wrong, but the boy does not answer. Clean regains some hope and decides to ask about the well-being of his companions. However, Ichinos tells them to ask one question at a time and questions who is by his side. In this case, the boy apologizes, admitting he made a mistake, but all this time, the hero had already been looking for a way to save them. As she walks around the monster, Yaju realizes that things cannot stay as they are, and she charges toward the protagonist because if she defeats him, her clan will finally be free from the angels. However, our hero lets go of Clean to face the girl head-on, and while parrying her attack, he announces that he has both good and bad news. One of the elves asks to hear the good news first, while Yeju states that she does not care to hear either. Regardless, Ichinos reveals that the good news is that the elf race will be saved, and although they become very excited, Clean asks what the bad news is. Then the protagonist informs them that the spirits will never be resurrected. However, this is enough for them to apologize for their previous disrespect. Moreover, Clean declares that he will give his life to atone, but Mammon quickly assures him that her master would never ask for that. Because of this, Ichinos slowly approaches, asking if that is what his servant truly believes. And while Mammon tries to understand the situation, the boy prepares for the sacrifice. Changing the subject, the protagonist asks if they know why fallen spirits do not die. However, one of the elves responds that an explanation is unnecessary since they can see it in practice, which leaves Ichinos slightly disappointed. Thus, he decides to demonstrate firsthand what happens by making a cut on his own shoulder. Obviously, his companions become distressed, and Clean apologizes once again for offending the Demon King. However, what they had not yet realized was that both they and the fallen spirits possessed almost instant regeneration. Because of this, the protagonist orders them to stop thinking with their mouths and start using their heads. And although it does not make much sense at first, Clean suggests that the spirits' bodies might be hiding something unknown, which is exactly the case. When he was consumed into the monster's body, the protagonist felt something while inside. His first action there was to ask if Padre was alright, which strongly reminded him of when he entered the last monster's body. However, since the environment was calm rather than frightening, it was clear that there had to be something there to be found. And as he searched for clues to save the spirits, the protagonist finally understood upon seeing a certain severed trunk. This was perfect because it was exactly what Ichinos had been searching for. In the end, all this time, the Tree of Life had still been protecting the elves, which was why they regenerated so quickly. Thus, to save everyone, they had two choices. The first was to revive the tree, and the second was to destroy it. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.